A very good afternoon and welcome to everyone for the day 3 of TechWit supported 7-day national level capacity building program e-Shodhyatra, Emerging Trends and Technologies in Scholarly Communication. This program is jointly organized by ICT Mumbai and the VES College of Arts, Science and Commerce. All our sessions today will cover various aspects of publishing. Our first session is on research writing, for which we welcome Professor Smita Zinzade. Before I hand over the session to Madam, I take this opportunity to introduce Professor Smita to all of you. Professor Smita is currently the Director at Institute of Bioinformatics and Biotechnology at the Savitribai Phule Pune University. She holds a PhD degree in microbiology. Throughout her career, she has handled various academic and administrative responsibilities, some of them being as the head of the Department of Microbiology at SPPU till July 2020, member of Academic Advisory Board of SPPU Research Park Foundation, selection committee member for appointments in various colleges, expert committee member for CAS, paper setter for state level eligibility exam, and also as an external examiner for the evaluation of PhD thesis in several universities. She has completed 19 research projects and is currently working on a project funded by the Naval Material Research Laboratory. She has published 97 research papers, 15 reviews, 12 book chapters, and has 4 patents to her credit. With such an illustrious career and rich experience in publishing, we are very happy to have you with us, ma'am, for this session on research writing. Over to you for the session. Thank you. Ma'am, you are on mute.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I will just put my screen on the I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'll just maximize it. Once again, thank you, Meghna, for that kind introduction. And I am, just for the audience sake, I will reintroduce myself. I am Professor Smita Zinzade, Professor and Director at the Institute of Bioinformatics and Biotechnology. And I must thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this particular talk in the e-Shodhyatra Emerging Trends and Technology in Scholarly Communication initiative that you have taken. And what I've done is titled my presentation as research articles, types, structure, layout, styles, and writing. Into bracket is something called as personal experiences. So what I'll do is I face several. If you say that I've published 97 papers, then each of those papers publishing gave me a new experience, let me tell you. So I'll try to share with you the mistakes that I made and tell you all how not to make those mistakes in the future. So what I've done is just one disclaimer statement which says that my talk is not intended to be exhaustive or definitive. It is more relevant to the examples that I'm providing, which are more related to my own work. I'm sure the audience here may be a little varied, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. I'll take a simple example of a paper that I published for, communicating to you what I want you all to know when we're tasked. I'm sure all of you all must be knowing many things, but I will try to explain to you on the basis of what experiences I have had. Okay, so what will be covered in this particular lecture is what I put up here. We'll be learning how to compile data. I'm sure all of us know, but I'll just tell you all how, small things that are important in compiling data, making it scientifically acceptable, all right? And different aspects related to scientific writing is what I'm going to cover in this particular presentation. I have put in here something like the greatest ideas are literally worthless if they are kept to yourself, and I strongly believe that they have to be reported. If you have a good set of data that is reproducible, that is good. It is very, very important for us to make sure that it is published somewhere, that it is reported. But reporting is a must to the scientific community. It is important to communicate with the scientific community, and reporting must be in a scientific format, and effectively sharing your findings with the scientific community is a major challenge. Okay, you really have to put in a lot of effort to get even a single paper published. It may take me 2 months, 3 months after the data is generated to get a decent publication in a manuscript written up, so that it is in a publishable form. All right. Unfortunately, threads do not work. As shown in this cartoon, the person on the left hand side is saying, this work I wish to publish is regarding the ruthless killing of a publisher who scrapped an excellent novel. Okay. And there, this is the publisher who's taken aback. So I put in a caption down here that unfortunately threats do not work, which means I cannot threaten an editor and say, come on, take my paper for accepting. I have to put in a lot of hard work to do that. So how do you go about it is the question that I put up on the next slide. You're supposed to ask yourself questions like, are the findings logical? Whatever you've got in the laboratory, is it logical? Is the material enough for publication or reporting? Are you presenting something novel or different? It has to, nothing will, that is gisapita will get published. It has to have some kind of novelty, and it has to be different in some way or the other. And for doing all of this, which is a suitable journal? Okay, so I put in a word out there, search. So an answer to all of this will be first finding out whether your data is logically correct. You will have to find out. Then, is the material enough for reporting? You'll have to find out what are the journals which are publishing data that is like your data. Are you presenting something novel? You really have to find out if there is some report already which has presented the work that you are carrying out or something like that, and which is the suitable journal that is there. The next question is where to publish. So depending upon the content of the finding, you will have to decide whether in the brackets I put in something called as article types. So if you have some 3 figures, 4 figures, something like that, it can go as a communication or letters, short communication or letters. If it is a research article, then it has to be quite a bit of data. So depending upon the journal we are sending, you have to have a decent amount of work to be done to make it into a full length research article. I have put in two things that are a review, which is based on secondary data. I have also some experience in writing reviews and writing book chapters, which of course we will have sessions which will take care of reviews, I think tomorrow or day after tomorrow. So I will restrict myself to the research article part that is there. And let me tell you, the layouts, formats for each of these are going to be different. Okay. For the sake of convenience, I've just picked up for you all to understand what are the different types of publication. I just picked up the food chemistry journal and went to the types of papers that are there. Okay. Highlighted in red out here underlined are categories. One is research paper. Second is review article. I'm sorry for the the line should have been below these. Okay, review articles, and then you have rapid publications, and there are short communications. Okay, what you can see out here is certain instructions that have been given, which I will elaborate on the next slide also. Research papers should be original full-length research papers which have not been published previously, except in a preliminary form. Review articles will be of some topical interest and will normally focus on literature that is published for the past 5 years or something. Okay. The third is rapid communications, original research papers reporting a major scientific result or finding out significant implications for the research community designated by the editor. And the fourth one is short communications up to 3,000 words describing the work that may be of preliminary nature, but it is merits immediate publication. So these papers should not contain more than 30 references. And the fifth one is letters to editors. I purposely read small things in these two things, which I want to elaborate out here. The most important thing is to learn to follow instructions. Okay, here you're given a set of instructions, so there'll be something for every journal web page. You'll give you a set of instructions for authors. For example, out here, research paper says that it should not be previously published. Anyway, it has to be that way, and it should not exceed 7,000 word, 500 words. And what are the tables and the figures that are allowed? There are not more than 6 tables. If you have additional tables and figures, they can be put as supplementary material. And they have another rider saying that only 40 references. So I made a mistake of going overboard and having a length that was more than what was required by them. I wrote up a review article in food chemistry, and because it was my first single author review article, I went overboard and made it 1200 words and things like that. You see that it was supposed to be only 10,000 words. I had a hell of a time, downsizing the whole article to make it 10,000 words, and there had to be only 80 references. So what I learned from this whole exercise was that we just learn to listen to instructions that are given. Follow instructions to authors. Do not use this part of your anatomy. If you are given a set of instructions, just follow what has been asked for in the particular instructions to authors that are there. Short communications, also they are saying about 3,000 words describing the work which I have already done. There are only supposed to be 30 references. So when you are submitting, there'll be a technical check that will take care of all these basic requirements that are going to be there, and therefore we must make sure that we have followed instructions to authors. Now I'll go to the sections in a research paper. I'm sure all of you may be knowing, but in my own way I'll try to tell you what each of these sections are going to be meaning. The first one is your title. It should be catchy, precise, indicative. I'll elaborate on all of these points. Then you have to have the authors and the affiliations as a part of the first page that's going to be there. What do the author and affiliations mean? Who did the work and where was this work carried out? The third point that's going to be there is abstract. What did I do? In summation, it's supposed to be somebody has their audio on. Can you please switch off the audio? The fourth part is the introduction. uh, what is the introduction? What is the problem that we have addressed in this particular paper? The next one is going to be a methods. How did I solve this problem that I decided to address? The fourth next one will be results. What did I find out? Discussion. What do these results mean? Acknowledgements. Who helped me out? Literature cited. Whose work did I refer to? And supplementary data, any other extra information that you want to present. So this is regarding the title that is there. The title, as I told you, has to be concise, crisp, describing the word. It has to be catchy. It has to catch the attention of the reader. And moreover, you have to have certain keywords inside the title, which will be used by the search engines so that people will find out your work that is there. Of course, this particular title will also be followed by the author names and the place of work. What I've done for the sake of understanding is picked up three titles of some papers that I've published to elaborate on what you're supposed to do. All right. So this is the first paper that we published, not first paper. It is a paper that we published in ecotoxicology and environmental safety. I'll quickly. So what did I tell you? You have to have a catchy, crisp, concise describing the work title. You have to have the authors that are there, and you have to put in your affiliation where this work was carried out. So these are important things that have to be there. They will appear in the journal in this form. You're also supposed to provide, they'll give you instructions of where you're supposed to put all of this. So I'll quickly read the titles of this title of this particular paper. Role of induced glutathione as transferase from Helicoverpa armigera. That's the detail of that particular insect that we are talking about. HAGST8 in detoxification of pesticides. I'm sure there'll be people from mixed backgrounds here, but I will just point out the keywords that are there. I'm a biologist, so I have, since I'm giving you experiences that I have with me, I will pick up things that are relevant to my field. I'm sure all of you will just, if you're not with biological background, please try to understand what I'm trying to tell you. I'll make it as simple as possible. I will pick up some examples that are more relevant to me and my work. So just imagine out here, we are talking about an enzyme, which is a biological catalyst for the non-biologists, which is from a worm that is called as Helicoverpa, bollworm, cotton bollworm. Imagine the one that bores off all the cotton pods that are there, and that is producing a particular enzyme, which is bringing about detoxification of pesticides. So it's telling you something about the enzyme, the novelty of the enzyme that is being produced, which is the source of the enzyme, and what is the job of that particular enzyme. I'll go to the next one. I'm purposely be taking diverse kind of topics that I have written on. This was a paper that we published in European Journal of Medicinal Chemistry. The title says four phenylquinoline derivatives as potential serotonin receptor ligands with anti-proliferative activity. To cut the story short, we are talking about some quinoline derivatives which are binding to some receptors in our body, and those particular receptors are involved in cancer. And therefore, what are we trying to do? We are trying to synthesize some chemicals that will have some activity, and the application of that would be a possible anti-proliferative nature of this compound. So that is something that what I mean by it is not too long. Okay, it has to be concise, crisp, and describing the word. Now, this is the paper that we published in Microenzyme and Microbial Technology. I'm going to keep on referring to this kind of a paper to elaborate on what I want to, communicate to you people. This is a paper on, I again read the title of this particular paper: Selenium Nanoparticle Enriched Biomass of Eurovia lipolytica enhances growth and survival of Artemia salinum. For the non-biologist, cut the story short, we have a particular yeast. All of us know baker's yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. We eat the bread and the wine, drink the wine that is made by Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Just imagine there is a related yeast called as Eurovia lipolytica. Okay, that one can interact with one metalloid called as selenium, and that interaction between the aerovia and the metal will give you a nanoparticulate form of that particular metal associated with that yeast. And what do we do? So selenium is the metalloid, nanoparticle is when this selenium interacts with aerovia, you get selenium enriched biomass. And this, what do you do? The application of this, if I feed it to an aquaculture, prawns and things like that, the growth and survival from pathogens is enhanced. So that is the kind of title that is again crisp, concise, describing the word catchy. And if there is a selenium keyword, if there is Yerba lipolytica as the keyword, or Artemia salina, it will be caught in those particular search engine by the search engines that are there. We go on to the next part, that is the most important part of your paper, that will be most likely to that is most likely to be read by many people, and that is your abstract. So what does it do? It summarizes in one paragraph. Usually I'll tell you there are different types of abstract also, the major contents of the entire paper. Okay, readers should get the zest of the paper by simply reading the abstract. I will not read a paper unless the abstract is fascinates me. So that's very important to have a nice abstract in place, so that after reading the abstract you feel like going and reading the full length paper that is there. I often follow a practice of writing the abstract after I finalize the contents of my manuscript. Normally, what happens? What the first thing I'm supposed to write for a paper? I see that in a paper, the first thing that is written is abstract. But let me tell you that there are many things that are important for us to first finalize before writing the abstract. Once we have finalized the manuscript, the contents of the manuscript, the figures that are going to be there, writing the abstract is much easier, because we have a clearer idea of what we have to present to the readers as such. Now, I just told you some time back that abstract can be of different types. There are at least three types that I know of, and I'll just quickly share with you what the contents of these abstracts should be like. Again, I'm taking the example of this enzyme and microbial technology paper that was published in 2017. In the abstract, I've taken the abstract as such from the paper and made some, my understanding of how the abstract is to be made is highlighted out here. There is an introductory part. For example, this is related to aquaculture. So controlling disease outbreaks is a major challenge in aquaculture farms, and conventional methods are often ineffective. Nutritional supplementation and probiotic preparations help in reducing severity of the introduction. So that is marked, that box in red is telling you something about an introduction, two statements on introduction. The body, as what I carried out in this particular work, I'm not going to elaborate on that because I'm going to really tell you in detail how we went about writing this paper. There'll be a body on whatever we results we got, whatever we did in this experimentation. You can see that often in the abstract you are supposed to put in some numerical values as to what are the results like and how they compared with others and so on and so forth. And the last part in this particular abstract is a concluding statement, which again I'm going to read. So I'm telling you there is a problem with aquaculture, and I'm giving you a hint that I'm going to give you this kind of a solution. And at the end of exercise, after telling you all of the details that I did for this particular paper, this combination, one conclusion statement, this combination of selenium in the nanoparticle form associated with the biomass of Yeruvia lipolitica has potential application in improving the health of the aquaculture species. I introduced you to the fact that there is a problem with aquaculture. I'm going to give you some likely solution to that. And at the end of the exercise, I tell you, yeah, I think so. This is the solution that is there. So that was a normal abstract that is there. There is some journals will require you to give, for example, letters in applied microbiology. We have a paper which is published way back, and it's on the disruption of fungal and bacterial biofilms by enzymatically synthesized surfactant lauryl glucose. Now, these journal wanted us to write the abstract in structured form. What do you mean by structured form? This abstract will have aim, a couple of statements, which rather one statement, which it may be long, but the ability of enzymatic synthesized lauryl glucose to disrupt fungal and bacterial biofilms was investigated. The second one will tell you something about the methods and the results. Actually, we got a set of results, and in brief, you're supposed to write the methodology that was followed to get these kind of results. There'll be one statement conclusion saying that lauryl glucose reduces biofilm growth of all the four test cultures and polystyrene and glass surfaces. And they had another section which wanted us to tell them about the significance and the impact of the study. This report is a novel application to the enzymatically synthesized, environmentally friendly, non-ionic surfactant. So that is something called as a structured abstract, wherein you do not have a single paragraph. You have many, many subheadings in that particular abstract that are going to be there. The third kind of abstract that many journals want is something called as a graphical abstract. Okay, I again have picked up the same paper in enzyme and microbial technology, which is related to selenium nanoparticle enriched Yerevia lipolitica, which enhances the growth. So, if I were to tell you this whole story in a pictorial form, I will say that I have some orange colored biomass here. You have to believe me that this Yerevia lipolitica yeast cells are now enriched with selenium nanoparticles in this particular orange suspension that is there to prove you that this is actually nanoparticles onto a yeast cell. You can see these are typical yeast cells, and the white dots that you see are actually nanoparticles. So I've convinced you that this particular orange structure, if I see under an electron microscope, is going to be nanoparticulate form of selenium attached to yeast cells. What do I do with these? I pick these up and feed them to this kind of an Artemia selena. What happens when I feed this to Artemia selena? The growth is enhanced, and they're protected against pathogens such as Vibrio harvey. So that is in a nutshell, in a very small pictorial compact nature, I have been able to communicate to you what I want to tell you in this particular paper. So those are three different types of abstract that are there: normal abstract, structured abstract, and graphical abstract. For writing graphical abstracts, or drawing them rather, you have to use your skills, your imagination. You have to see what looks good, which color will look good with this, and things like that. So your artistic inclination has to be used for making the graphical abstract. So that again, graphical abstracts are important for viewers to quickly go through the, oh, this picture is, oh, interesting, I should see what the content of that particular paper is, what graphical abstracts are all about. We go to the next section that is related to the introduction. This establishes the context of the work to be reported. We are supposed to discuss relevant preliminary research literature along with citations and summarize the content, current understanding of the problem that you are investigating. Then state the purpose of the work. Toward the last part of your introduction, you're supposed to introduce to the reader what you are hypothesizing, what is the problem you have asked yourself, and what are you trying to investigate. So briefly explain your rational approach, and whenever possible, there are a small line of the outcomes of the study that is there. Generally, we use an active voice for such kind of introduction. Again, for the sake of understanding and giving you an example that is more close to my heart, I picked up this paper that we have published in Enzyme and Microbial Technology. Once again, I tell you from this title, we can identify some keywords. Okay, Artemia salina, which means that I'm going to tell you something related to aquaculture. prawns, fish cultivation, and things like that. So for this aquaculture, I'm using a model system called as Artemia salina. The second, hello, hello. All right. What we have out here is one paragraph that is related. Somebody is not on mute. So paragraph is aquaculture. Second keyword is Yarovia lipolytica. Third keyword is selenium. So you see a selenium, you see a Yarovia lipolytica, and the third keyword is aquaculture or Artemia salina. So in the first paragraph, you will have to say that aquaculture is one of the fastest growing food sectors and diseases are a big problem and conventional methods of antibiotics, their use is posing problems. So what is the way out? You can change the nutrition and therefore you can have alternative techniques that are there. So I'm priming you that aquaculture is a sector that is important, that's facing problems, and there are some non-conventional ways of handling the problems that are associated with infectious diseases that are there. So I'm priming you the last statement, you see one paragraph leads to the other one. So the last statement is what I'm going to, they can be administered as food. Probiotics, I'm just trying to tell you that you can feed yeast to the aquaculture species and their growth can be enhanced. So probiotics are microbial food supplements that help in maintaining the balance of the intestinal microbiota of the host animal. Imagine that they are good, they can be administered as food supplements or as food additives in aquaculture practices. Bacteria and yeast belonging to different genera can be used as probiotics. I'm leading you to a paragraph which is now going to deal with one particular yeast. Therefore, I leave it on the first paragraph on introducing you to what the yeasts are. Then I go on to this paragraph on Yerovia, which is going to be my model system that I'm going to study. And I say that Yerovia is important. It has very applications, single cell protein, single cell oil. Some they have got excellent fatty acid profile. They are known to interact with different metals, and it is important. It has tolerance towards different metals, including selenium. So what did I do? I told you that I'm leaving you at yeast here. Then I'm elaborating on the yeast model system I'm working, and then I'm telling you that Yerovia is important because it has tolerance toward different metals, including selenium. So that is guiding me to the third paragraph, which is related to the third keyword, which is selenium. Then explain the importance of selenium in this particular one and tell you that I have to convince you to the best of our knowledge, there are no reports in the synthesis of selenium nanoparticles by this yeast, means Yerovia lipolytica. And I go to the last one, which is on the basis of the literature survey. We hypothesize that this yeast may be able to synthesize selenium nanoparticles in a cell associated form and may allow the growth of aquaculture model system. And then I detail to you what you're going to read. We have detailed in the study synthesis of nanoparticles by this yeast, characterization. You have to believe me that nanoparticles has been synthesized. So I'll give you something related to the characterization of these nanoparticles. I'll tell you the nutritional effect on model aquaculture system and the efficiency of this to protect Artemia against Vibrio infection. So this is encompassing the introduction that I've told you. You highlight, find out what are the keywords in your title and try to elaborate on each of those keywords by linking them with one another. Okay, it cannot be just you, like I told you, I left this at yeast, I described the yeast, I left this at selenium, described the selenium, and then told you what's the gap in literature. So now how are we going to fill the gap in the literature? By doing this work in the present paper is what you have to highlight. Okay, then we go to so I told you something about the title, I told you something about the abstract, I told you something about the introduction. We go to the next step, that is the materials and methods. This of course is going to be exclusive for the work that you have been carried out. You have to explain clearly how you carried out your study, which was the organism you use, protocol, data analysis, statistical software. Since I'm a biologist, I'll tell you all of this. But if you're a chemist, you're a physicist, or any other scientific person, then you have to choose your methodologies appropriately, or they may vary. Since I'm talking about a biology related paper, they will include all of these points that I've mentioned out here. You're supposed to organize your presentation to your reader and so that there is a logical flow in the set of experiments. I may have done, which means I took an organism, I treated it with selenium, I did the characterization, then I did the toxicity studies, then I fed it to Artemia, then I saw the effect of the feed on Artemia. These are the kind of things. So it has to follow logically. Even your materials and methods have to be following a logical train of thought, actually. So their logical flow of experimentation is to be highlighted. If you feel that there is something that cannot be linked to each other, just put in subheadings, the effect of this on this or whatever. So then if they're unrelated, then you can use subheading for putting these materials and methods in place. Most important is your repeatability and statistical analysis. Whenever you decide, I'm sure all of us know that all experiments have to be done in triplicates with two biological replicates with a lot of scientific analysis, and repeatability is very, very important. On the lighter side, I have a cartoon here. You have Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree, and there are two people conversing and saying that reviewers have asked him to reproduce his experiments. So do not wait for the reviewers to tell you to give, replicates and things like that. It's important for us to have at least triplicates and two biological replicates to get any meaningful reproducible data that is there. So after the materials methods will come a section on the results and discussion. This is intended to objectively present the key results that are there. Generally, you're not supposed to say that I made a standard graph for this particular estimation. All that is not necessary. Not the raw data. If you have a gas chromatography profile, it is not necessary to put all the profiles there. If you want, you can put in some selected profiles that are there, and it includes tables, figures. What is going to be included in the results and discussion? There may be figures, tables, graphs, outcome of statistical analysis. If you have got some negative result, also mention that, okay? And generally the results are to be written in the past tense, and you include appropriate units when reporting your data or summary or statistics that is there. The interpretation of the data should be avoided as this section is only results. All right, I'll elaborate on that. Many journals will say that you write the results separately and write the discussion separately, or they may put in a saying that you can combine the results and discussion, whatever. So depending upon what the journals want, we really have to write our results and discussion part. I reiterate, some journals would want the results part separate, which will be just listing of what are the results that you got without discussing them with any other work that is previously reported, or they can have a combined results and discussion. Then in the case of the first case where the results are separate, you will have to discuss your results in a different section in the form of comparative literature accounts that are there. In the combined results and discussion, you can report a result and discuss it off, which I will take up as an example in the next part. Most important before writing even your results and discussion is to decide what data. You may have got a lot of data, you feel, yes, I should put everything that I did in the laboratory, sorry, in my paper, but it is necessary to filter the data that is there and put only things that are really important and relevant and following sorry, a logical train of thoughts should be included in this. All right, so I may deviate from this results and discussion section and tell you that you have to first decide your figures. Okay, the results and discussion section will be describing your tables, figures. So if you have this particular paper that I was talking about, selenium, yeast, aquaculture, good growth, protection from infection. So that is what is the theme of this particular paper. Then I decide my figures. Okay, maybe I'll describe this to you. So the story goes that I have a yeast, which you have to believe that there is a yeast culture on this particular plate, and this is without selenium. The moment I include selenium into the medium, this turns red. When I pick up this culture and see it under the microscope, I can see some yeast cells typical like Saccharomyces cerevisiae. If I pick up the culture from here and see it, you can see some red cells as such. Okay, so I decided that this should be a part of my figure. The non-biologist will also try to understand that I'm trying to convince you that if I grow this yeast on selenium and feed it to aquaculture, you'll get better, good results. So that becomes my first figure. My next figure is to convince you that this orange color is actually due to the presence of nanoparticles. So do some techniques that will show, ensure. Believe me that all these figures that I've done, that figure 2 is related to the characterization. Figure 3 is showing you how this Yerovia looks under the scanning electron microscope, and I showed you this figure earlier also. These white dots are actually nanoparticulate forms of selenium, and you will believe me when you see the symbol of selenium in this particular chart. And then what do? I decide that they have to be fed to the aquaculture strain, and then I have to show you that with this gray bar, the survival, whatever the growth is good, and they are also, this is also to physically show you by simply observing the Artemia salina. You can see that this is grown in the presence of the normal feed. This is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This is normal Yarovia, but this particular one is grown nice and fat and tagda because if it has been fed on selenium nanoparticle containing yeast. And the fifth one is if I challenge this particular saline Artemia with an infectious agent such as Vibrio harvey, this particular biomass is able to protect it from death. Okay. If you see these two figures, I put in something here: format, scale, font, legends. These are more or less similar kind of figures which will have the same font, the same scale, the same pattern. So it's very important to have your figures, like in line with the entire theme of the paper. So now I decided that in this particular paper there are going to be 5 figures or 6 figures that were the journal was permitting us to have. I come back to the results discussion. So what did I do? I have to describe the 6 contents of the 6 figures that I have identified and write them in the form of results and discussion section. So organize the discussion. If it is, I told you, if there was a results and discussion section, then you have to organize the discussion in such a way that you present all of your results correctly, discuss them with the literature available, and do not restate the results if there are there in that previous section that are there, and you must relate your finding to the other studies of work done by previous investigators. Somebody has their audio on, please put it off. uh, so results and discussion. Again, for simplicity's sake, I have picked up 2 figures that we have published, that we have presented in this particular paper. This figure is again like I showed you. I'm going to quickly forget about this. This is the results and discussion section of this particular paper. We will start off from here. Okay, compared to the cream, you simply, even if you are a non-biologist, you would understand that this is cream colored. So compared to the cream colonies, you have to believe me that these are called as colonies observed on this particular plate that I'm using. Compared to the cream colonies observed on MGYP agar, those on selenium containing agar appeared to be red, indicating the synthesis of selenium nanoparticles. Microscopic observations of the cells grown in control plates are shown here. This is typical morphology of how the yeast looks like under the microscope. And if I pick up the culture from here and see it here, it appears red. That is what is described. Exactly how I'm telling you, I'm putting it in scientific language. When suspensions of the test culture from selenium containing plate were observed under a bright field microscope, cells were seen to display a reddish tinge in indicating the synthesis of selenium nanoparticles. I'm priming you to the fact that now you're some biomass that is full of selenium nanoparticles. I discussed this off saying that this is an agreement with an earlier report on this yeast showing purple tint on treatment with orium chloride after synthesis of gold nanoparticles. So that's the result, and immediately some discussion that is following it. I again has picked up this particular figure that most people will understand. The take home of this particular figure is compared to Saccharomyces cerevisiae or normal yeast that is there. Selenium enriched biomass is enhancing growth. the biomass is more. In this case of this, more means Artemia salina has grown in a better fashion. So I have boxed something out here. After 7 days of incubation, morphological changes were observed by using a bright field microscope. Size and morphology of control 1 and control 2, that is Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Yerovia, were found, were comparable. So you can see the size of both of these are more or less the same. However, in the test feed, the size of the larvae happened to be larger. You can, any non layman can also say these are of the same size, whereas this one is larger. That is what I have to convince you. And then this is documented in literature. This is my discussion part, that selenium nanoparticles can improve the final weight and relative gain rate of cultured fish. This is a discussion. Somebody else has also said that. And efficiency of selenium nanoparticles in improving stress, resistance, and bone mineralization in fish larvae have also been reported. There is thus a need to incorporate such kind of micro nutrients in the diets that are going to be there. So after your results and discussion, remember I decided those 6 figures, then I explained each of those figures, and then results that we have obtained were compared with what is available in the literature. After that comes an important part, that is the conclusions part of your paper. So I'm quickly going to rush through the conclusions that was written for this particular paper. A marine strain of Violipolitica was able to tolerate sodium selenite and synthesize selenium nanoparticles in a cellar-associated manner. Now you are convinced that this yeast is able to do that. The effect of selenium-enriched nanoparticles, selenium nanoparticle enriched Yarovia on growth and survival of Artemia salina larvae against Vibrio harvey. So I'm telling you what I studied in this particular thing. Then some small statements on what I observed compared to normal baker's yeast, A. salina, that is that aquaculture species. The growth was improved, survival was improved. Moreover, they were protected and their growth was better, their development was better, appendages were better, and they increased the immunity. And find one final statement saying that neurotoxicity risks in its nanoparticle form, and since Biolipolitica is generally regarded as safe, now to convince you that yes, you can feed your aquaculture systems with Yarovia because it's safe to eat. It is selenium is in the nanoparticulate form that is non-toxic relatively, and therefore, and this combination is giving you wonderful results with respect to enhancing growth and stopping the artemia from being infected. Therefore, it could be one of the strategies for one of these significant for strategies that could be effectively used for reducing aquaculture infections in an eco-friendly manner. So this is biomass. You're not adding any chemical. You're not adding anything. You're just feeding this biomass and doing it. There are certain other aspects that need to be included in a paper also. There is somebody who has helped you out with respect to thinking, designing, carrying out work, or you have received material from someone who did you a favor by supplying them, then you're supposed to put their names in the acknowledgement. If they don't, they have not significantly contributed to the work, then they often like to be acknowledged. So that acknowledgement part that is there in the paper, you're supposed to acknowledge the people who have helped you out in whatever way that I've listed out here. You must acknowledge them for their assistance and the service of the material. Somebody does a scanning electron microscopy for me, I will say thanks to CIF, this person associated with the Central Instrumentation Facility, for doing this analysis for me. Those are the kind of statements that I expected in the acknowledgement part. And there is often a thing called as conflict of interest. Do you have any conflict of interest with anybody? That generally we do not have. It is our own work and we have done it in a very fair form. And if it is done, you have no conflict of interest, they expect you to write something like the author's report, no conflict of interest. After this particular presentation that I have made, I would urge all of you all to, I'm sure you must be reading papers and all that, but read them with the kind of points that I have discussed in today's this thing. Typical acknowledgement in the paper that I just presented to you on selenium nanoparticles, Yarovia, aquaculture, all authors thank University Grants Commission for funding under University with Potential for Excellence Phase 2. So what am I doing? I got some money from University Grants Commission. University Grant Commission expects me to acknowledge them and say that yes, because of UGC, I got the money and I was able to carry out this work, and therefore my work has been published. The second one is Fasila, who was a co-author there. She had a project from DST, which was on WOSB, Women Scientist B, and she has to thank the scheme for that, that agency, DST, for giving her the money of her fellowship and other consumables. And there was Mugdha Apte, I don't know if she's there on this meeting. She was a recipient, she was also a co-author here and a recipient of a fellowship from Savitribai Phule Pune University. So now University Grants Commission feels good, DST feels good, and Pune University feels good that we have acknowledged their role in providing us with the funding that is there. So acknowledgement is very, very important. And the last part, which is relevant to a paper, is the literature cited references or the bibliography. So we must keep in mind something, some important points. All references in the text must appear in the list. You have to actually sit with your text and keep on taking. I do that. Okay, I'll sit with my text and sit with my list of references separately. One bunch will be list of references and one bunch will be the manuscript. Then I will, when I'm reading, I'll physically tick mark all of those references. That ensures, if many of you all must be using citation managers and things like that, but I'm old fashioned, I still like to tick and get my references in place. Then there are, I would like to highlight to you that every journal, of course, nowadays you also have the concept of your paper, your style, whatever it is, but many journals still want you to have them formatted in a particular manner. The styles are different, is what I've said here. Some journals require the references to be numerically arranged. Means the first part, if you saw my results and discussion part that I shared with you, there were some numbers in brackets, which means, that is what I mean by you don't have to put this one et al, this year, but you have to say that this one said this, means in a number. So then that number will go back to your reference list, and that number one will be the author that you want to refer to as such. So that is what I mean by having references numerically arranged. Then whenever you're supposed to, there is a big task in making these numerically arranged references. Generally what I do is I'll freeze all my manuscript, I'll freeze the text, the references, then I'll start numbering. I'll have an intermediate file which will say that, suppose I said Zinzarde et al, my reference number for that is going to be 1. I will have one version which will have Zinzarde et al in bracket 1. Okay. And then I will save that version into another form which will lack the name of Zinzarde et al. It will be only in bracket 1. This allows you, in case you have to, your paper gets rejected from that journal and you have to resubmit to a journal which wants you to put it in the form of names of authors, then you have that manuscript ready. You don't have to redo and undo. So it's always good to use an elimination principle, have one manuscript which will have both of them. Okay, so that is what I mean, that freeze the text. And then remember, if you don't freeze your text and you remember, oh, there was an interesting reference that I would like to put inside this, then your numbering goes all wrong. And therefore it's good to freeze your manuscript and format your references in a numerical form at the end of the exercise. So some of them will also need them in an alphabetical arrange manner. So this is numerically arranged, example of numerically arranged, which means that I had some text in which there was something about aquaculture that I mentioned in the introduction, and that happened to be a Lewing paper happened to be number 1 in my manuscript. Zaria happens to be the second one. Wu paper happens to be third one in the chronological order that they appear in that particular manuscript that is there. Uh, Again, I believe that there are lots of people, there are many, many tools that are available nowadays to manage your references for you people. But I am old fashioned and I will read the manuscript references like I'm doing. I'm going to read one reference which has easy names. Okay. The third one maybe. That is the style in which I read my references. Okay. There is Y full stop, Wu, comma, J full stop, when, comma, Y full stop ma, comma, X full stop ma, comma, Y full stop Chen, comma. Then there is a title which I do not change. After the title is going to be a comma. China, that the China is the end of the paper. There is a comma after that. Then 2003 to 8 is this is the time frame. This again from here to here is the title of the paper. Then this is the journal that is there. So food. After the title of the paper is going to be one comma. Then food control is the journal. 46 in bracket 2014. I'm sorry, because of this camera I cannot see the page numbers, but suppose there were 215 to 222, then I will write 215 to 222. That's the way you're supposed to see. If you see, the same kind of format is followed in all of these. I will also take the pain of reading one alphabetically arranged. You can see Abhilash, Ahmad, Armstrong, Bapat. Okay, this is all of alphabetically arranged. So they may have appeared as Abhilash et al. 2009 anywhere in my text, but at the end of the exercise, I'm supposed to put them in an alphabetical manner. I will take the pain of reading this last reference, which happens to be our own. So this was Bapat, comma, G full stop, comma, Labde, comma, C full stop, comma, Chaudhary, comma, A full stop, comma, Zindade, comma, S full stop, comma, 2016 full stop, the name of the review that we publish. Now they want abbreviation for this. ADV, colloid interface, SCI, full stop, 237, there is a comma, 1 to 14. So that's the way I read my references. I also train my students to read the references. All of them have to be in the same format. Okay. I agree that I may be old fashioned, but that's how I am. And I'm now so trained to doing references that I can do at least 20 25 references in 20 minutes time as such. And I've put in the bottom out here. This is one of our papers that was this is actually a review which was cited in a subsequent paper that came up. And this is there's something called as citations. It is good to have a few of your own citations in your papers, not because at this moment I'm not a struggling scientist. But there are many people who are early in their lives. They want to have their papers to be cited, because all of us know that scientists are rated on the basis of the citations that they receive. And therefore, like this struggling scientist, please cite my paper. This is jokes apart. You can have citations important. Suppose I put in my own paper in a particular manuscript that I've written up, it shows that I'm already doing some related work. Okay, so that is the importance of putting some of your own relevant papers. I will not put my 100 papers into all my publications. Anything that is relevant will have to be put in this particular paper of interest that you're talking about. Just one more thing, I thought, now that you have your manuscript ready, you're supposed to write a letter, covering letter to the editor. I thought I'll just share with you the letter that I normally write to an editor. You'll have to identify who the editor of that journal, write one subject, write Dear Professor Park in this case, have a paragraph which is detail of the paper that is being carried out, means what is the title, who are the authors, and how this qualified to be a part of the scope of the journal. And then write one statement, one paragraph, and how you have the summary of the work, and the novelty is what they have, and one concluding paragraph. All these authors are supposed to say that this work is 100% original, it's not published anywhere. Many journals want you to write certain statements that are given in the instructions to authors to be included in this, saying that yes, we know that this is all novel work, it's not published anywhere, and therefore needs to be published in this particular journal. So you have your addresser to whom you are sending this, you have the subject, you have the first introduction, you have the gist of what your paper is like, and one concluding paragraph saying that yes, this is all good, and we hope that you will publish it in your particular journal. Then whoever is the corresponding author is supposed to generally sign this particular covering letter. You're often asked to provide names of reviewers. I do not know many people in this world who are scientific, and they're this, they're. I personally do not know many people. What I generally will do is find out some people who are working in related fields and whose names I have included in my manuscript, whose work I have referred to. So those are the kind of people I suggest as reviewers. So far, my 100 papers or so have been published by using this kind of a strategy. I believe that if you do your job correctly, you write your manuscript correctly, the chances of getting published are very high, in spite of not knowing the reviewers. I do not know any of these people who were reviewers for some of my papers that I have written. And So now that your manuscript is ready, you have written a covering letter, you have identified your reviews. What is the next thing? I'm sure them you must have had elaborate sessions on how to go about this. You're supposed to go now, nowadays all of these are online submissions. You're supposed to go to the journal web page, create a login, decide your password. Then I told you you're supposed to follow some set of instructions that are there. They're all user friendly software that will lead you one thing to the other. You're supposed to upload your manuscript by following instructions that are there. This will then go for a technical check. Some clerk in the editorial office will go through it. Like I told you, 10,000 words mean 10,000 words. He will check whether we have followed the instructions to authors. Once he says it's okay, or she says that's okay, then it goes to the editor. So all this while, when you log on to your login and put in your password, your account will show you the status of your manuscript as such. So first thing, when you send it to the journal, it goes to the editor. So your job is to, in your covering letter, convince the editor that there is a lot of novelty in this whole work and that he should consider it. Now the editor is not going to decide whether to publish or not. He is going to decide whether it is going to go for review or no. I'm not concerned if the paper get published or not. Even if I get valuable comments from reviewers, I'm quite happy. So the first task is to make sure that the editor is convinced that this particular work is worth at least going for a review. So you should avoid getting, the editor. Very often there are 70% rejection rates for many journals. So editors rejecting papers is very common. I've just put in a couple of cartoons out here. Editor says manuscript would serve some purpose if it were written on toilet paper. Or there is another cartoon which says that I donated kidney to an editor once, and the other person asks what happened. Oh, it was rejected. So that is what editors are known for. They have the deadline of putting 70% of manuscripts into the trash bin, and that is what happens out here. All right, now you have convinced the editor that yes, this is worth sending for review to reviewers for reviewing process. Then what happens? It will go for peer reviewing. There are three outcomes that are possible. One is a minor revision, wherein small experiments will be asked to be done. Then you're supposed to do them. There may be a major revision. Mostly you have to do several experiments, write up your manuscript again. Of course, they'll give you some pointers on where you have gone wrong. So that's why it's very important to have your reviewers going through your work so that you at least know what are the mistakes you have made and you try to correct them. If it is a revision, then to the same journal. If it is a rejection, then it has to go to another journal. And they will also give you a timeline for revision. Okay, this again is a cartoon which says that just like you have recycling centers for paper, glass, cans, the rate at which manuscripts are rejected, you may have to have another trash bin for even manuscripts is what here is there here. Nonetheless, I would tell you that even if a manuscript is rejected, it doesn't matter. We get useful comments which we can, we get suggestions from different reviewers who have gone through this manuscript in detail, and they have suggested that you do these kind of modification, do these experiments. And let me tell you, if we carry out these, we follow the comments that have been provided and do your additional experiments, you can pick up better, you can make a manuscript that is better. And of course, don't get disheartened. There are many journals. Use the comments for the next journal is what I've said. And do not lose hope. There are many journals. Once we have got inputs from some experts, we can always modify the manuscript, do additional experiments, modify your language, modify the figures that are needed, and appropriately do this. Now, this again is a cartoon which tells us that publishing is quite difficult. On this road, we see people like us who have some paper in hand, and there are so many steps that are going to be involved, and eventually the outcome out here is going to be a paper accepted. And so many people with, so many swords and god knows what kind of equipment trying to chop you off on your paper off. But that is just jokes about, this is just a what would you say, a cartoonic impression of what actually happened. but I would tell you that we need not be disheartened. There are, in my own life, there are several success stories that I would like to share with you, right from a summer trainee who was working. So next three slides are, success stories that I have picked up, three or four success stories that I'm going to just share with you in the next 5 minutes. And then I will be open for any question answer session that is there. I understand that this particular presentation is timed until 3:15. So just listen to my success stories, but often they are quite motivating and you feel like doing something. So when I showed you the previous cartoon, you understand, you will be left dejected and saying, oh, there is so much, there are so many obstacles and how do I overcome, then all. This is ending on a negative note. I do not want to end any lecture on a negative note, and therefore the next few slides that are there, so in another 5 minutes or so, I will share the success stories that I have encountered. Of course, there'll be examples of some of the people that I have been associated with, and how there is a cumulative effect is what I want you all to understand. For example, there is Bhagyashri Joshi, who's highlighted with a red line. Okay, she was in the first year of her BSc. What would you say? We have an integrated course at IBB, and the students are with us for 5 years. So she had got the chance. She approached me and said that I want to do some project with you or with me for the summer. And that was the time when I had just ventured into the field of nanotechnology. And we had Ashok Bankar was my PhD student, and he wanted to study whether banana peels, which are actually thrown off, discarded, can be used as biomaterial, not biomaterial, material for actually making different types of nanoparticles. And if you see that there are three papers in which she is a co-author. This is Bhagyashri Joshi, wherein we studied the effect of, when we studied the banana peel extract mediated novel route for the synthesis of silver nanoparticles. This was in a journal called as Colloids and Surfaces A, Physicochemical and Engineering Aspects. I reiterate, I'm a pure microbiologist, but as a result of a lot of exposure, being open to doing different type of work, I have ventured into different fields, and I have publications in a vast variety of journals, which may no way be related to microbiology. Okay, so that is how we do all of these. So she is a co-author on this paper in colloids and surfaces as A. She was in her second year or third year of the integrated program when she had a paper in colloids and surface, another one in colloids and surfaces B. This was impact factor more than 3. This has an impact factor close to 5, 4 point something. And there is also one in materials letters, which is an impact factor of 3.205. Let me tell you that if you work for a summer intern on a topic that is, very specific, and you put in a lot of hard work, then and then of course you have to carry on the work a little later on also. You can put in a lot of effort, and she is a co-author on 3 of my papers by the time she's in her third year of BSc. Okay, so that is one example I've taken as a success story. The second success story that I've put up is of Ashit Rao. He was my MSc integrated he did his MSc as well as his MTech at Institute of Bioinformatics and Biotechnology. Currently, he is in Germany pursuing his postdoc, and he's doing exceedingly well in life. And his Google Scholar account you can go through, and he's done very, very well even after leaving IBB and going to Germany. Let me tell you that this Ashit Rao has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 papers to his credit soon after his MTech. Okay, this was his third year paper, the work that he carried out at his third year, which was under cloning and expression of tyrosinase from Aspergillus oryzae in Yarovia, and application. Normally, my papers will have some basic study with an application that is there. This was published in Applied Microbiology and Biotechnology with an impact factor of 3.5. This is the masterpiece that he created out of his MTech program, which was in a journal called as Applied Materials and Interfaces, which has an impact factor of 8.758. This was related to this M1, 2, 3, 4 are related to his MTech work. And this was also one paper what that was related to his MTech work. This was in the Journal of Contaminant Hydrology with an impact factor of 2.3, and another one in Material Research Bulletin, which has an impact factor of 4.0. So by the time this boy is going out of IBB, he has 5 papers to his credit. Obviously, somebody in Germany just picks him up and he does exceedingly well in life. So he is one of my success stories. And this is another student who, this is called as Harshada Sovani. She was a PhD student at the Department of Chemistry, and I helped her out a little bit with, since the work was related to hydrocarbon degradation. She approached me and we did a lot of collaborative work. And this is a masterpiece that um, real wonderful work that we have been carrying out. This is a PhD thesis work. So an ideal PhD thesis will have to do some literature survey. So she did a literature survey on the topic that she was working with and has one review on an insight into ecology, diversity, and adaptations on the organism that she's working on in a journal, very classical journal called as Critical Reviews in Microbiology. I feel pride as a microbiologist to publish a review in a journal like Critical Reviews in Microbiology, which has an impact factor of 7.349. And then she again went again because her job was related to hydrocarbon degradation and getting rid of pollutants. She wrote up another, along with us, we wrote up a review on harnessing the catabolic versatility. Again, you see the titles that are there: harnessing the catabolic versatility of Gordonia species for detoxifying pollutants. Okay, catchy, crisp, telling you what we're going to talk about. This has an impact factor of over 10. She also was co-author on writing up a book chapter. So this takes care of a literature survey, and the 4 papers that are presented out here are related to her work in very good journals. One with an impact factor of 4, international deterioration and biodegradation. One in environmental pollution, which has an impact factor more than 6, and process biochemistry, which is, so she is very proud to have a paper in process biochemistry because she's a biochemist. Okay, so process biochemistry impact factor 2.9, and another in enzyme and microbial technology 3.4. If I add up all of these impact factors, they come to, she has a publication record with a cumulative impact factor of 35.359. Okay, that is amazing for a PhD student to have such a high cumulative impact factor. But the major beneficiary of all of these papers happens to be me. Okay, why do I say that? I have been working in Savitri Bai Phule Pune University for over for the past 20 years now. Okay, I have used the infrastructure that is provided by our university. Although I have collaborations, most of the work is done in my laboratory, and I've just picked up my Google Scholar account. It's open. Anybody can just go to Google Scholar and type in my name. You'll get this. So it's nothing great that is there. It may not be number of citations also. I'm not claiming they can be very great or anything like that. But just like I was given a kind introduction which says that about 97 papers, 15 reviews, 12 book chapters, 4 patents to my credit. Let me tell you that the consistency with which I've been able to publish my papers and pay reviews particularly with, you are supposed to see the Google Scholar page by seeing the citations that are there, the H index that is there, I-10 index. I'm sure somebody would explain these terms to you, and you can see that this graph is increasing, which means the impact of work is going on increasing. All right, at this moment, I have been I don't know, in newspapers for good reasons. And this is a cutting of the Maharashtra Times. In Stanford, there was a survey carried out on finding out who are the top 2% scientists working all over the world, including India. And they came out in a PLOS biology paper with the names of people who are included in this. They have used a set of criteria, okay? On the basis of the criteria that they have selected, I'm very happy to tell you that the consistent hard work and the, inputs from my students, I have been able to feature in the top 2% scientific community list that has come up in this particular PLOS biology paper. So I had received several congratulatory phone calls and emails because there were articles in Maharashtra Times, and this photograph in Sakal gave me even more publicity, and therefore I'm really happy. At the end of the exercise, I am a very satisfied person because the 20 years of hard work that I've put in, and the students and my co-authors who have helped me out in this journey have really have meant a lot to me. And getting a recognition from some author in Stanford who's doing analysis and trying to find out who is a good scientist, and your name featuring in that list really made me very, very proud. And that is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your patient listening. The next 4 or 5 minutes that we have, I'm open to answering any questions that you have. You can also mail to me any question that you have, and I would be more than willing to explain anything to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll take a few questions.
Yes.
One of the participant is asking that she hasn't come across any graphical structure of the abstract.
Yeah.
So is it only specific to the biological science, or is it across fields? What has been your
Okay. Applied Materials and Interfaces is a ACS journal. Okay. Even they would want a graphical abstract. I had made a graphical abstract even for Applied Materials and Interfaces. It depends upon the journal. Okay. The journal will tell you that we want a graphical abstract, then you're supposed to make it. Most of the biology related journals demand a graphical abstract, which will not be a part of the paper. It will be there on the web page. I would urge you all to go to, say, Enzyme and Microbial Technology and see if that paper is really there and the graphical abstract is there.
Thank you, ma'am. One more question here is that can you please explain more about conflict of interest?
All right.
What is that exactly?
See, most of the journals would want this. See, for me, though, I don't have a conflict of interest with anybody, which means that you have done your job in a fair manner, and nobody should have a problem in you publishing this whole business. Okay, that you have not excluded anybody's name, that you don't have any conflict of interest. Actually, really tells you that you don't have a problem with publishing this paper, or you don't have any goodness with anybody. That kind of a thing, if I were to tell you.
Thank you.
there is another question, ma'am. The researcher is asking how to cite a website reference in a research paper or in a thesis or a dissertation. What if one has a PDF file from a website and not from a research paper, but a document or a report? I think it is more to do with the citation style.
Yes, all right. Sometimes maybe when we are using some software and all that, there may be not be a paper. So that HTTP, that link that is there, you can put it in place out there. You need not put it in the reference list. You can simply put it in bracket wherever you are referring to that particular work maybe. Or you say that whoever, if it is Smita Zinzadeh's thesis, then you say Zinzadeh 1997, and in the citation you put that thesis submitted to SPPU for award of PhD degree, something like that has to be done.
Yeah.
Meghna, you can take the next question.
Okay. There is a question how to identify authentication of impact factor of a journal. So I think this is a very, yeah.
Before I made this presentation, I went to the journal webpage and
Yes.
I got the latest impact factors of whatever I told you on my success stories. I didn't want to mislead you. Some of the impact factors may have risen, some of them may have fallen down, but the impact factors that I put in today's presentation are from the webpage and they will put in the correct one. I'm not worried about the spurious journals and all that. All the
Yeah.
journals that I talk about will be Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis, ACS. So those that are displayed on the web page will be authentic. Is that what I'm? But if there are many predatory journals and all that, which I think somebody else would have the authority to speak on that and things like that. But
Yes,
I
we do have a session later on this.
yes. So they will be able to answer that question in a better manner.
And there was one question of personal pronouns,
Yes.
whether we should use I, we, or whether they are allowed or not allowed.
I though generally know because we can sometimes, we try to find the effect of this, we can do. In the last concluding part, it means when I'm writing my introduction, I will say that in this paper, we describe the use of this for doing this. That is allowed. In this paper, we investigate the effect of aerobia, biomass on aquaculture. That is allowed. But there is also something, sometimes you're supposed to put in a journal that you're not supposed to disclose your identity. Okay, so then we have earlier submitted a paper, published a paper, and you put in your reference. Then you have to be careful that that's not in place. Then you're disclosing your identity. If that kind of a, there is a rider with a journal saying that you're not supposed to disclose your identity as previously reported, and then you put your reference. You cannot say that we published and put in your reference. You're actually disclosing your identity if you're doing that. Okay, you have to take care about what the instructions are there in the instruction to author section.
Any more questions, Madhvi?
Yeah. There's one interesting question, that how do one decides the authorship sequence?
uh, all right. Whoever does the major work will be the first author. Okay. For example, Harshada and me and her guide did the job. Then Harshada is the main one who's working in the laboratory. She becomes the first author. Let me tell you, you can also, if two people have done the work, you can put 2 stars and say that equal authorship, like that one. Although the name of one person may appear further, if you put this indication that both authors contributed equally, that is also permitted. And then, so the major work is done by somebody. Then somebody helps me out with one small part of the thing. So that person becomes a middle author. If somebody helps me with a manuscript, that also becomes a middle author. And I'm the one who took the lead. She's my student, say. Then I become the corresponding author. Becoming a corresponding author is a major challenge. It's a big risk. Anything goes wrong, I lose my job. Okay, so that's the kind of risk that is there, and we really, the corresponding author has to take a lot of responsibility. Make sure that their data is clean, reproducible, and there is no problem. There is no conflict of interest. So all correspondence will always be with the corresponding author. So that is the way the distribution of authorship goes. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. There is one question where the participant wants to know if the author needs to know the reviewer personally.
It is not necessary at all. I told you my 100 papers, 100 plus papers, I did not know any reviewer personally. I randomly pick up people who work in my related field. I will see. I'll tell you a few things about how to choose your reviewers. Okay. So I wrote up my manuscript. I go to the references part and I find out who is young, okay, who is working still in this field. I may have somebody who has worked on this field in 1997. That 1997 person may be in science, may not be in science, may be in this world, may not be in this world. So I cannot choose those kind of people. I will have to choose who are already working in this field in this time. Okay. So you can choose from the reference list, find out those who are young, means who are still in science, who are still doing this job and on related fields. And then I pick up their names. I don't even write to them saying that I'm going to put you as a reviewer or anything. I just suggest. And eventually it is up to the editor to send it to these people or somebody else also. You really don't know whom your paper is good. I personally do not know any of my reviewers. Okay. So I put in a lot of hard work when I'm making my manuscript, and the success rate that is very high for my manuscripts is because of the hard work that me and my students put in to make sure that all the manuscripts are foolproof. And then when they go to the editor, they say, oh, this is worth publishing. Then they send it for review. The reviewers also give positive comment. Give me, let me tell you, over these 100 papers, I have had rejections only on 2 reviewed papers that was there. Okay, only on 2 occasions. Otherwise, anything that comes to me for revision is generally accepted. I'm very honest. Only 2 of my papers got rejected even after putting a revision as such.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of the organizers and the participants, I would firstly like to congratulate you for appearing as a recognized scientist in the PLOS biology paper. And I thank you for this detailed presentation and a wonderful question answer session that we had, which clarified the doubts of all the participants to a very large extent. Your resume by itself is a very big piece of research, and it depicts very nicely the hard work and your enthusiasm and your commitment in this field. The way you use the cartoons in your presentation also spoke volumes about the way, you know, how people have to handle things and take things in stride. And it was really nice to know that only 2 of your papers have so far been rejected, and we are
After
sure that
revision, okay, after revision, many get rejected.
no revision, yes,
There.
it's a learning for all
But
of
I
us that
don't
we have
lose hope
always.
ever. I never lose hope. I'm a very positive person. I know
Yes.
that something good. It often happens that your paper gets rejected at least 3-4 times. My paper got rejected in a low impact factor journal. I took the khundas as I said, come on, let's put it in a higher impact factor journal, and it got published in 7-5 impact factor journals like that. So I never lose my hope. I have full faith in myself, and that is what I want this audience to also have faith in yourself. Okay, faith in yourself, your science, and what you're doing. There is one question which is just coming up here. I'm a young researcher. If you want,
Yeah.
I can in 2 minutes just, if your time
Yes,
is
yes,
permitting
yeah.
me.
Sure you can.
There is some question, maybe you can read out. I just saw it flashing on my screen. I'm a
Yeah.
young researcher, something.
I am a younger professional. Please guide how to start to write journal articles. Is what
Okay,
somebody
I
is
told you that is
asking.
exactly what this
The
presentation was
entire
all
session
about.
was all about. Yeah.
Okay, so you carry out a good piece of work, decide what are you going to figures, tables, whatever, and then start describing those figures, tables, and in the form of the sections that I just described. You give her a recording of this presentation. It'll be useful for her to understand that is what is there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for accepting our invitation and sparing time to deliver this talk. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Over to you, Madhvi, for the next session. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, sir, just a minute. She will introduce you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So academic publishing is for communicating your academic research to others, to the scientific community. Scientific and scholarly journals and many academic and scholarly books, though not all, are based on some form of peer review or editorial referring to qualify text for publication. Being an early career researcher, it becomes difficult with the challenges of trying to get your research published. Many a times it is experienced by researchers that the process of communicating his or her research through publishing in a peer review journal might be far more difficult, lead to disappointments, and time stressful than actually doing research. In order to make the road of publishing smoother, researchers should probably make themselves aware of the publishing process. Try and understand the vocabulary of the field, the exact process which can lead you in the positive direction so there is less disappointment and lead to successfully communicating the research output. Constructing the right manuscript, choosing the right journal, knowing the rights of the author, understanding the recommendations of the reviewers, and on the whole knowing publication process would always be helpful for a researcher to get published in quality publications and avoid pitfalls. To give you all an overview of the publication process, to address the challenges you face and increasing your chances of getting published, we have with us Dr. Raghu Vamsi, who is an independent consultant to Springer Nature. On behalf of institutes to this TechWhip supported 7-day national level capacity building program, e-Shodhyatra, Emerging Trends and Technologies in Scholarly Communication. Before Dr. Vamsi begins, I'll quickly, briefly introduce him to you. Dr. Raghu Vamsi obtained his PhD at Iowa State University. His thesis focused on the synthesis of nanomaterials for heterogeneous catalysis, with an emphasis on reusable materials to advance sustainable energy goals. During his academic career, Dr. Raghu has published various peer-reviewed research articles and participated in various grant writing initiatives to procure funds for the lab. He is also involved in collaborative research across universities to further advance the application of the material he synthesized. An important component of his PhD training was the emphasis on how best to convey the group's research objectives to both the scientific community and funding agencies. He has been heavily involved with seeing manuscripts from their inception all the way to their final acceptance in various high-impact journals. As a result, he is quite familiar with the nuisances of the editorial process one encounters in academia, having also reviewed submissions to various journals. Regarding national funding, he was involved in writing collaborative research grant with his advisor at Iowa State that has secured funding for group research via NSF, that's National Science Foundation. So we welcome you all, we welcome Dr. Vamsi, and over to you, sir.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. I'm just going to share the screen now.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure this is, okay, give me a second. Share screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Ma'am? Ma'am, I think you're mute. Okay. So I'm just going to begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see. So I will just be giving you an overview of how I went through the process. I think the previous talk was, I just joined in at the last minute, but that talk was very explanatory about the whole process. But I'll give you some basic perspectives on how to approach the publishing process and what you have to do to, begin with your manuscript, jot down your data, all that work, right? Nearly 3, 4 to 5 years of your PhD work. At various stages, you'll be writing a manuscript to convey it to the larger world. So I will just give you my experience and then try to address any questions that you have based on the same. Okay, the screen. Okay. Yeah, so basically translating discoveries at the bench to the academic level. Okay. Let me go next. Yeah, so basically the most important thing about your manuscript is your title. Okay. I would say normally, even though this is my first slide, I would say that you always put this at the end. Your advisor, you, and all the other people in that publication are going to have to take their time and put the manuscript's title very carefully. It has to convey every single idea in a less than 20 words. Okay. So because your manuscript is something that people are going to be looking at. So when it first goes online, people are going to use certain keywords to find your manuscript, or if they see something suddenly and they look at your graphical abstract, also known as the TOC, they have to be enticed into wanting to open that paper and read it. Okay. So even though this is something I would advise you do at the end, when you finish your manuscript, this is very important. Okay. I put it as my first slide because it's important. Okay. It should include what's important. What is the most attractive catchphrase that your research is about? It should have some keywords that can be easily searched, that are popularly searched. Okay. Avoid abbreviations and don't go into very detailed descriptions of what the paper does. Okay. You have a maximum of 20 words, less than 20 words. Most journals have an upper limit as to how many words you can put in your title. So basically it's like summary writing. You have to write a title and then summarize it to the exact content of what your paper is about. And you should make people want to read it. Okay. So a key principle you can use was just state what was investigated, what was measured, and the sample the measurements were taken from. Okay. Let me go to the next slide. So the next thing after your title is your abstract. Again, this is something that you will be writing at the end. Okay. So your abstract is something that is a little more expanded from your title. It has the aims of your work. Okay. Again, everything should be summarized. Most journals have a summary, have a limit of how many words you can put in an abstract. Some have 50 words, some have 100 words. It depends on the journal. Okay. So when you go to various journals, they will tell you how many words you can put in the abstract. But again, this is like a summary. It's a little more detailed than your title. Okay. First, you should start off with the importance of your topic. For example, I was doing work in heterogeneous catalysis. So most of my aims began with addressing energy shortages. For example, if CO2 is a problem, how can we address or ameliorate the amount of excess CO2 in the atmosphere? So that you should start off with a catchy idea of why your research is important. Okay. Then by that, as you progress, you have to give a summary of what you did that is different from what others did, and why your result is significant. Why is it contributing to the existing research that is already there? You have to justify, okay? You can't just write a paper because you were curious, you did this research, so now I'm publishing it, now accept my paper. No, you can't do that. There has to be a relevance to your work, to the current context, and how it improves the field. Lastly, in your abstract itself, you should have a simple conclusion, like a 2-line conclusion, 1 or 2-line conclusion of what did you finally decide? How do you think this is going to affect how do you think it's going to impact the larger research field in your area? So yeah, these 3 things, okay? Your aims, like 2 to 3 lines, your results around 3 to 4 lines, and your conclusion, 1 or 2 lines max. So this abstract is again something that's going to be on the main page. When a person goes to visit a journal, they will see your title, they will see your graphical abstract, your TOC, which is just a pictorial representation of your results, and they'll see the abstract. Okay. So for them to go more further into this, they need to be attracted by all these 3 things: the title, the abstract, and the graphical abstract. Okay. So in this whole thing, it has to be, there has to be absolute clarity. Like, even a layman should be able to look at your abstract and say, okay, this is something I want to invest my time reading. So this is an example of a paper we recently published while I was working in Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research. So this is a review, okay? You can see the graphical abstract on the side. This is the graphical abstract. And you have the abstract, which tells you the whole history of how carbon dioxide is a source that can be considered as a fuel. And it gives you a brief introduction as to what and all we're going to be discussing, like how CO2 can be ameliorated and converted into useful olefins like polyethylene and other things using catalysts, and the various types of processes, that types of routes that can be used to convert this. Okay. Another thing I forgot to mention, but I mentioned that was there in the first slide, were keywords. Okay. Again, these keywords, they may look very simple to you. Okay, but they are the major definitions for what your paper is about. Like, so if somebody puts CO2 reduction on Google Scholar or anywhere on ACS Catalysis, on the ACS Catalysis website, for instance, your paper will turn up. So it shows up as one of the most recent papers that has been published on this topic. So you have to also identify your keywords. In this particular case, we have had, I've included some, my boss has included abbreviations like RWGS, okay? Avoid abbreviations because they may not be that popular. RWGS is popular because it's reverse water gas shift, but some of the abbreviations you use may not be as popular to others in the field. Okay, so now I'll go to the introduction. So like I told you, okay, you begin with your title, your abstract, your graphical abstract, and then your introduction. All these things you actually leave for the end. The way I wrote my papers was, I would first do my experiments, then get my data. Like, I have some TM images, or if I have graph-based data, like if I have some experimental data that has been plotted on, say, Excel or Origin. The first thing I would do is put my data on a paper in a sequential order. Graph 1, figure 1. This is the material I made. This is the data for it. This is the thing I characterized it by, and this is the data for it. This is the final catalysis I ran, and this is the data for it. These are my conclusions. This is the data for it. So the first thing I would do is put all my data in a paper in a sequential order. Okay. Because what this does is it helps you decide how to write your introduction. Okay. Your introduction is basically, the first thing it's a review of all the research that has been done in the field and what prompted you to do this particular work that is unique in this paper. So first you will introduce the topic on a worldwide relevance, regional relevance, or the broad specialized audience. Okay. Then you're going to talk about what is known about the topic. Okay. So all these things, the introduction of the topic and what is known about the topic, you already have a rough idea about this while you're doing your research. Okay, you're always worried about somebody else doing the same research or something like that, right? You don't want to repeat research that has already been done before. So you will be gathering this material, like you'll have a reference manager, like say EndNote or Mendeley or Zotero. And what happens is you'll be collecting these references, but I would recommend that you don't start writing the introduction yet. Start with your data, but these are the things you'll have to follow eventually when all your experiments are done. Okay, your introduction will have the maximum number of references because you're citing other people's work and the motivation for why you did this work based on their work. Okay, so yeah, here I mentioned this tool. It's called EnoReader. EnoReader is a good way to, I have another slide on EnoReader itself. It's like an RSS feed. Okay, what you can do is you can choose what kind of research, daily papers. Papers are published almost every day by every major journal. Okay, and you have to keep abreast of the latest events. So a good way of doing that is something like EnoReader. Okay. Now, apart from that, you're going to construct your introduction. You're going to have to write your introduction. You're going to have to cite a lot of papers. Okay. For that, I would recommend using reference managers like EndNote. If your institution has EndNote, that's great. Otherwise, there are other ways of doing it. Like you can use Zotero or Mendeley. I think Mendeley is free. Okay. So what a reference manager additionally does is it keeps a track. You can subdivide the topics into which you want to talk about in your introduction and later in your results and discussion section also in the paper. Okay. So normally what happens in the final paragraph of your introduction is you have already, the preceding paragraphs have given a history of the problem, like what has been done so far, who has done this, what is the unique approach somebody else has followed, what is different about what you're following. Okay, your final paragraph will distill the entire research work into that last paragraph of your introduction. Okay, where you clearly describe this is what we did that is different, has not been done before, and we believe this will help the community. Okay, so that's your introduction. Okay, it should, that last paragraph should have very specific aims. Okay, so now after the introduction, so I've discussed, so the things I've discussed so far are the title, the abstract, the graphical abstract, and the introduction. Okay, the way I would say you do it is you do those things last. Okay, the first thing you'll actually be doing, apart from putting your data in sequential order, is your methods section. The reason why this section is important is you are going to say exactly what you did. How did you design your experiment? Where did you buy your materials? Why did you buy those materials from particular things? And you cite the purity of the material. You cite the source of that material. Okay. The reason why this is important is somebody in the future might want to repeat your results or improve upon your research. If they see that what you've cited is not something that can be verified, something that cannot be repeated, that invalidates your research. Like your research becomes meaningless if somebody else cannot repeat it. Okay, repeatability is very, very important. And that is also encountered in the review process itself. The whole reason the review process is there is to make sure that your research is repeatable. Okay. So the method section, apart from putting your graphs and your data together, the first thing you'll be writing is your method section. What did you do? How did you do it? What instrument you used? Like, for example, if I was in this method section in my paper, I would even mention the model of the gas chromatograph I used. Okay. So because gas chromatographs and the columns you use, even the columns we use, because that will tell you if that person is doing something else, he has to calibrate his data according to what you used. So if he's using a different column, he may have to apply a different retention time, something else to make it match with what we are doing. Okay. So yeah, this is actually the easiest section of your paper, your methods. Okay, because you're writing this paper, this section of the paper, after having done at least over 1 to 2 years of work. So you repeat experiments a lot, you repeat the same analytical technique, the same methodologies that have become like second nature to you. It's become like your identity. Okay. So you should have no issues writing this down immediately. Just start scribbling it. Even when you're doing in your record book or your computer, when you're writing the experiment for the day, every time you're going to write the methodology, right? Like, okay, I took this much ml of this much ml of that, this material, I took sigma aldrich, this chemical. So this shouldn't be that hard. Okay. So you should be able to write this pretty easily. And you also need to mention the kind of software you used. For example, in our field in catalysis, we do a lot of density functional theory. So the density functional theory is usually done by someone who's a specialist in computational chemistry. So what they do is we will leave that section blank in the method section and ask them to fill it up. Okay, you tell us the software you used, what was the computational limits you used, what was the conditions you used, put it all clearly, because again, if somebody else is repeating the research, they can look at this and not waste their time. Okay. So basically, why the method section is important is anybody else who's doing this research later or who's doing it in your field should be able to repeat your data. Okay. So yeah, I would say this is the easiest section to write, and it's probably the first thing you can write. If you're having trouble, like if you're having writer's block, or if you're worried about when do I start, how do I start writing my paper, this is the best place to start, because your methods will tell you what you've done. It will give you it's like a rewind, right? What you did during your research, and how, while you write this, you can imagine how to write your introduction and how to write your results and discussion. Okay, now coming to the results and discussion. Okay, so like I said, you write your methods first. You have your graphical data first, put a Word document, put all your graphs and all your images in a sequential order, such that if somebody is looking at your graphs and your images, they can tell a story. After you do that, you write your method section. Okay, where you're summarizing all the experimental methods you used over the course of the project. After these two, after your graphical arrangement of your figures and your method section writing, this is the next section you should be considering writing. Okay, your results and discussion. So your results and discussions is like a detailed story. It's a storytelling exercise. You're summarizing your entire research into the span of 6 pages, maybe, or maybe more, 7 pages, depends on the journal. Okay, especially if it's your first author paper. You're telling a story that could easily be 3 years of hard work. You would have gone through so many failures, so many successes, and you would have probably seen somebody else publish your research before you, and how you would have had to adjust according to that. So this is basically a documentation of your suffering. Okay, so you are writing it with passion because you know what you went through to achieve this. Okay. So the first thing that has to be evident throughout your manuscript is how your study contributes to the field. You cannot submit your paper to a high impact factor paper and tell them, I did this research, it was spurred because of my curiosity, and that's why I did it, now accept my paper. No, it has to be relevant to the community. The community should feel like when they read your paper, they read something new and they're gaining some information, or you're improving upon the existing research. So yeah, your implications of the work, like why is your work important? Okay. So initially you will start by describing what you did, your experimental methods. You briefly describe your study design. You'll summarize your key designs. Okay. And you will start off by saying that you have to mention, apart from the introduction, you should also mention in your results and discussion why this is important. What is the common problem here? Why my material will do this better than the previously reported materials. Okay. So once you put your data, interpreting your findings is very important, because you have to anticipate what your reviewers are going to ask you. When you write your research, if you're going to observe something that you didn't expect to observe, you may have to do additional experiments and rationalize those findings based on a review. You can do like a literature search and see if anybody else has noticed this. Maybe you didn't notice it, maybe you didn't plan to observe it, but once you observed it, you have to find a review of other people who've done this. And if you're the first person reporting this, you may have to do additional experiments, because I can assure you that If you have a finding that doesn't make sense to somebody in the field, they will ask you to do some additional experiments to confirm that what you saw is what you saw. Okay. So that's why the interpretation of your findings is very important. If you're doing something that's already been done before, or if there are some reports previously that have noticed a similar peculiar observation, you have to cite it and you have to say, okay, these people have also found this. I am also seeing this. So this is what I think it is. Okay. You don't have to be 100% right, but you can give a explanation for why you're seeing the data that you're seeing. Okay. And most people may think it's not good to report negative results. I say it's a very good thing to report negative results. If you report something that you expected to see, but didn't see and saw something opposite of it, that is helping another researcher. So if somebody wants to repeat your research or continue your research in some fashion in the future, they can look at your paper and say, okay, they tried this, they failed at it, and they told me why they failed at it. So maybe I don't need to waste my time on this. I can do something, I can devote that time to something else that has never been done before. Okay, so this is an important part about your results and discussion. Even if you have negative results, don't say they are not worth it. I should not put them in the paper. Sometimes some papers are composed entirely of negative results. Okay, and those papers are actually cited very often because they hold meaning. They help save time. Okay. And finally, in your results and discussion, see, you're going to start off with explaining your methods, how you did, what you did, and what does the characterization tells you, what does your initial analysis of the material tells you, okay, why you saw what you saw, and what do you think the explanation for that may be, how does it help in confirming previous theories about this kind of material or this kind of phenomena, okay. So you have to put your case as much as possible. The idea is to anticipate that reviewers will ask you very tough questions. So the whole process of writing your results and discussion is an exercise in making sure the reviewers have as few questions as possible. Okay. So finally, when you come to this, you have to come to a conclusion. Again, in the conclusion, you have to emphasize why your work is important and what the future direction of that work can be expected. How is it going to add to the existing understanding, and how in the future people may discover more materials that are even more helpful. So you have to give some kind of perspective on it, like some prognostication of how the future is going to be. Okay, so that's your main conclusion in the results and discussion. So this is a book. So when I was in Iowa State, this individual, Dr. Rafael Luna, he had this book. It's a very thin book. I think it's hardly 80 pages. If you can get a copy of it, it's very, very helpful. It tells you everything about how to write your results and discussion. Okay, like he has published papers in some of the very high impact factor journals. I would suggest you also go and check out this YouTube video. It's a very good YouTube video. It's essentially the same talk that I had the luck of seeing live at Iowa State. Okay, so the art of scientific storytelling. So look at this. The energy diagram. Basically, you're telling about your introduction, initial setting and problem, your result 1 and result 2, and your clincher results. Okay, so that is the main selling point of your paper. And sometimes a keyword from your clincher results is going to feature in your title and your abstract. Okay, that is what is going to attract someone to read your paper. Okay. So I would suggest, if you can get a copy of this book, please go and find it. And if not, even the video talk that he has given, it should be there on YouTube the last I checked. So please have a look at it. He tells you how to write your paper, especially the results and discussion section. And he gives you like models on how best to tell your story as interestingly as possible. Okay. And you can also read this paper. It's a Nature Immunology paper. It's not a paper about immunology. It's about how to write your research in an exciting fashion. So this is another paper I think many of your professors or PIs would tell you to read. It's a very popular paper. It's by George Whiteside. He's one of the greatest scientists known in our time. Okay, it's a very simple paper, and it tells you how you should organize your paper and what you should and shouldn't avoid, like about active and passive voice, about how to introduce your research, what kind of pronouns to use, what kind of details you need to put in your methods, why is this important. So this is a paper that almost every PI in the US will ask their student to read in the first year. I'm not sure if this is followed here too, but I've seen a lot of people in when I was in JNCSR, a lot of PIs recommending this paper to their first year students. To students who join the group for the first time, they are asked to read this paper. Okay, so please go check this paper out. It's an old paper, but it will forever be relevant. Okay, so now results and discussion. Remember the thing I told you about writing your paper first to begin, right? If you're feeling like, oh, how do I start writing a paper? What is the motivation I need to write my paper? The best way to motivate yourself is to start with your graphical data, your images, your actual raw data that's going to go into the final paper. Okay. So your results, okay. It should be like you put your figure one, the main figure, the first figure or scheme or anything. I'll show you an example on the next slide. Okay. So sometimes what happens is people have a lot of papers to read. Okay. So what they're going to do is once they'll open your paper, they'll first look at your abstract. They'll look at your graphical abstract, which is the TOC, the table of contents figure, and your title. Okay. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to look at your graphs. How well your graphs are made, how well your images are made. They will look at that and they should be able to get some kind of preliminary understanding about your research and the impact of your research just by looking at the figures. So which is why it's very important that you make sure your images are very good quality. Use good software. Use, for example, for graphical plotting, I never used Excel. I used Origin. There's Origin and there's some other useful tool, I forgot. But Origin was the best for plotting graphs, especially experimental data, and to kind of, evaluate what is going on. I only used Origin. Okay. So this figure should be high resolution. It should be very clearly placed in your paper in a sequential order, and it should be able to tell a complete story. Okay. So yeah, so more than one figure. Every figure in your paper should be able to explain itself. So I'll give you an example of this. Okay. So this is a paper I published this year. One of my juniors in my lab, he used the material I had made and then continued to do the research. Okay. So from these graphs, okay, the topmost graph is figure 1. It gives you an indication of the particles we made, the high resolution TM. It's attractive as it is. Okay. This is an open access paper, by the way, so anybody can go and access it to understand. If you're interested in catalysis, you can go and check this paper out. So then this is the second figure. The second figure summarizes all our catalysis in one single graph. Okay. Again, like I said, we use Origin, right? So this graph was made using Origin. Okay. And it clearly tells you exactly what's going on. Like if someone who's familiar in this field looks at the graph, they know what they're looking at, and that's enough for them. And they may invest in reading the full paper or not. But if this is exciting for them, they'll go further into the paper. Okay. And then we have a scheme which explains the potential mechanism based on what we saw in our experimental data. Okay. So ideally, this is making your graphs, making them clear, making the images clear and high resolution is itself a very hard task. It's not an easy job. So actually, if you do it first and then go on to writing your methods, you will be saving yourself time to focus entirely on the results and discussion, the introduction, and the abstract. Okay. So graphs are a very important part of your paper. The more data you have, the more clear your pictures are, the more efficient it is for your paper. Okay. So this is the graphical abstract. Okay. This is my paper, which this is my first author paper. And when I published it, initially I used Excel to make the wrong version, which you can see the wrong version. Okay. Obviously anybody would prefer the final version that I put in my TOC, the graphical abstract. When you go to the page, when you go to the ACS catalysis page, this is the first image you'll notice. It's the table of contents graph. Okay. So this is important because again, it tells people the story of my paper. And if I had gone with the first one, nobody would have given a damn. They wouldn't have been interested in that at all. It looks very bland and boring. Okay. And I used PowerPoint to make that. Whereas the second set of graphs, I used an advanced software called 3ds Max. Okay. It's an advanced software. Some universities do have subscriptions to it, but you can do stuff like this in Adobe or Lightroom or any of those things. So you have to invest in the TOC. If you don't have a good TOC, the chances of someone opening your paper are reduced. Okay, so TOC and abstract are the first things that tell people this work is exciting. Okay, so yeah, in summary, I will tell you how your paper has to be organized. Okay, this may seem like the natural sequence of the how you write the paper. Okay, first you have your introduce the topic. This is in your introduction. After your title and your abstract, you have to introduce the topic. You have to do a review of currently published studies, problem in the field, and why what you're doing is different, and your objectives for doing this research. Okay. Then your methodology. Your methodology, I cannot stress this enough. It has to be as detailed as possible. Leave no details out. Have as many details as possible, because your research is only validated by how repeatable it is. Okay. And your results and figures. Okay. These results and figures should be able to tell the story by themselves. Okay. Mainly your figures. And finally, you have a summary of your findings. Then you interpret your findings, and you have to say why this is relevant to the field. Okay. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, right, why this study needs to be done is covered in your introduction. What you did, your methodology, your results and discussion, your interpretation of your findings, what you find that is a unique contribution to the field. Okay, and how your study will advance the field. The reason why I'm putting in stressing the importance of these things, this sequence of events, is that, see, when you go to a high impact factor journal, or even if it's a low impact factor is a big deal, I agree. But at the end of the day, publishing your research is more important. Even a low impact factor journal will have a seemingly rigorous practice of understanding, asking you questions. Okay, what is the relevance of your work? Every impact factor journal that is once that is high impact factor today was once a low impact factor journal. Okay, when I joined, ACS Catalysis had an impact factor of 5. Today, ACS Catalysis has an impact factor of close to 12 or 13. Okay, so don't imagine that just because the impact factor of a journal is going to be less, the reviewing process is going to be less rigorous. Okay. Okay. So like I was saying, this is a tool you can use to keep up to date with your field. Okay. You can customize it to give you the latest publications in the journals of your choice. Like in your field, you may have certain journals that are very relevant to your field. You can choose those and then have these papers turn up in your feed. Like every day they refresh it and you get the latest published papers. Okay. So this is called Eno Reader. And I think there are other alternatives to this, but this is what I use. This is a reference manager. Okay. This is I use EndNote because in our university, we had a subscription to EndNote. And I think Mendeley is free, and even Zotero. I'm not familiar with Zotero, but I think Mendeley is a great way to organize your literature. So what a reference manager does is that it makes it easier to do your introduction when you're referring certain manuscripts, or you're making your final reference list of all the publications that you refer to while writing your introduction. A reference manager makes that very easy. Okay. And the other advantage of using a reference manager is that, I've seen most of my colleagues and my friends and almost every researcher, if you go to their computer desktop, it will be filled with PDF files on the desktop. Like there's numerous PDF files. So you have to, it looks messy and it doesn't look very organized. Okay. You have to search for a particular topic and you may not exactly find it. Whereas if you use a reference manager, you can subdivide topics and make subgroups and put that particular paper in that particular subgroup. So a reference manager will help you organize it more. And the other advantages in Word, mostly if you're using Word to write your manuscript, some people use LaTeX. Word has an inbuilt EndNote application. You can have a plugin in Word. It'll help you directly cite. So while you're typing your manuscript, you can cite a paper using the EndNote type file, the RIS type file. Okay. So this is another important part of your submission. When you finish your manuscript, if you're going to be submitting a paper, you need to have a good cover letter. Okay, this usually maybe your boss will write, but sometimes they're going to ask you to write. Your PI may be writing this, or they may ask you to write. Okay, so the cover letter is something the editor will read. If your paper is important and if your paper is of great value to that journal, the cover letter is the one that's going to sell it to him the most. Okay, so initially you're going to introduce your manuscript, the manuscript title and the article type, whether it's a review or whether it's a letter or whether it's a long form article, whether a general article or whatever it is. So that will be the first few lines of your cover letter. Okay, so this is the most important part, why your study is important. Okay, you have to give a brief background of the developments in this field and what you did and what are the unique findings that you have found that are relevant and worthy of being included in that journal. Like, why you think the ACS catalysis readership, for instance, in my case, will be hugely benefited by this development. Okay. Then you can give a list of like hot topics, hot discoveries that you made that will be exciting to everyone. Okay. You can gauge the importance of your, what you found that is important by going to some conferences or some talks, or if you see what if your PI has gone to a conference and he's presented it and people are curious about it, you can find out how it is of relevance to other people in the area. Okay, and you have to conclude as to how this is relevant to that journal. See, you cannot for example, in my field, I cannot do something in spectroscopy, purely spectroscopy, and then send it to a catalysis journal. There has to be a catalytic component in my paper to send it to a catalysis journal, right? There are some like JACS and other journals have a broad review. You can send anything to them, but sometimes you have to show why this particular paper of yours is relevant to that journal. Okay, is it very specific or is it very broad ranging? Everything has to be specified so that the editor, when he's looking at this, he looks at this and he says, okay, you've made your case as to why your paper needs to be published in my journal. Okay, so that is an important part of your cover letter. So you have to introduce your manuscript, say why the study is important. You have to sell the paper here. Okay, what you found that is uniquely a contribution to the community and why it is suitable for that journal. Okay, and here is this additional information. What you can do is you can list some reviewers you think are ideal for your paper. It's not necessary that those reviewers are the people who the paper will eventually go to. Okay, what happens usually is the editor will see your list of referees. He may send it, he may not send it. Okay, but it's important to remember that you should not put someone who's very, very who's worked closely with you, who has anything to do with the paper. There should be no conflict of interest. Okay, like that person who's reviewing it should not be partial to you because he has an interest in your work further, or he has an interest in the work being published as is. Okay, so you need to be careful about this. You can put friends or people who you think will be more generous to when they review your paper. Okay, but do not put anyone who may have a conflict of interest with the work. Like if they have something to gain from you publishing that work directly in that work. For example, if they're writing a grant with you together, if they're writing an NSF grant or if they're writing some kind of government grant, and they're going to be using this data to apply to ask for funds, it's bordering on conflict of interest. Okay. So yeah, furthermore about the cover letter. Okay, it's your 10 minutes alone in a room with the editor. You're being asked to sell him a pen as something revolutionary. So you have to convince him that this is amazing. Okay. So like I said, don't make the cover letter exceed 1 page. Everything you need to say about your paper has to be contained within a single page. Okay. Yeah, referee suggestions. Okay, who might have useful insights into your work. Okay. And do not suggest former supervisors, recent or current collaborator, as I told you, right? Don't put anyone who might have some kind of conflict of interest with your work. Okay, like they may be like biased towards your work, which is not good. Okay, you can also put a list of referees that you do not want. This is in a special case. Okay, this is like if you're doing some work where somebody is a competitor, somebody is competing with you on that work, and they're doing similar work, and you are trying to go out of the gate first before them. So you have the right to do this. You can put some referees who you want to exclude. Again, there is no guarantee that the editor will not send it to them. Okay, it just gives them an idea of what you're thinking. Okay, and if you think, so just make sure that this, you also cite in the cover letter that this publication has not gone anywhere else. Okay, so that is important about this aspect of the cover letter. So the cover letter is the first thing the editor will see. The editor will see this, he will look at the abstract, he'll look at your title, he'll look at the graphical abstract, and then he'll make a call as to whether to send this further to the next person, the sub-editor. The sub-editor is the person who will then send it to the reviewers. Okay, so that's why your manuscript will take time, especially in papers like high impact factor journals like Nature and Science. It can take anything between 3 to 6 months for the paper to finally come back after review. I'm not saying publication, after review. Okay. So yeah, I'll just summarize everything here. Okay. Choose an attractive title. You can only do this, choosing an attractive title, after you've finished writing your whole paper, like your results and discussions. You've revised your results and discussion. Then you decide what is the thing that stands out most. And that's the most important thing to put in the title. Okay. Good graphics equal to good data delivery. I cannot stress this enough. The more clear and more perfect your images are, the more your paper's relevance will become. Okay. So in your results and discussion, I would say you guys, everybody, please go and check out that talk by Dr. Luna. And if you can get a copy of that book, it will tell you how to write your story in an interesting fashion. See, even the most boring data can be presented as well as possible. It all depends on how you want to write it. Okay. Again, if you want to improve how you write, you have to read as many papers as possible. Okay. The Dr. Rafael Luna's talk and the Whiteside's paper, I would recommend that you look into it. I will be sending this presentation to the organizers, and they will probably share it with everyone. So you can go and check those two references out, Dr. Luna's and Dr. Whiteside's, Professor Whiteside's. Okay. So yeah, your TOC graphic, I already gave you an instance of how, how my TOC was when I first devised it and how it was when it finally came out. And the kind of software you can use, you have to get creative, as creative as possible. Okay. Revise, edit, check references. This is very important because each journal has its own reference format. Okay. You don't want to delay the publication of a manuscript by doing something wrong. Like, for example, if you put it in the reference format of a different journal than what they asked you to do, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time. Okay. So you should, normally in my group, one paper, after I wrote a manuscript, we would review it at least 30 times. By the time the final version comes, it'll come final 30. My name, my boss's name, everybody else's names will be there. So the document used to be revised at least 30 times. And the track changes was like a headache, but that's how it is. Okay. If you want to give a good submission, if you want to make a good impression, you have to revise your paper as many times as possible. Okay. So this is one thing that is important. I think almost every journal, you will be having a lot of data. In your journal, on average, you can only put maximum 7 to 8 figures because journals have a limit, right? Because apart from putting their online versions, sometimes they also come out with huge published versions of the papers. Okay. What you'll notice is that by the time you finish all your experiments, 3 years of work, 4 years of work, many failed attempts, you'll have at least minimum 200 graphs, maybe more. Okay. I had a friend who published her paper in ACS catalysis. Her supporting information document was nearly 250 pages. So the 250 pages was mostly NMR data and reaction data that had failed but had value. So the reason why you need to put the slightly less relevant data in the SI is because someone who's following your work may want to see more, may want more than what's in the main manuscript. Okay. The main manuscript has limits, so limit it to the best data. But in your SI, you can put everything else. There's no limit to how much you can put in the SI because the SI is not printed. It will always only be online. Okay, the supporting information. Yeah, so like I said, the cover letter is your 10 minutes in the room with the editor. So make sure it's as spectacularly, attractive as possible. Okay. So the other thing is choosing the appropriate journal. Okay, so make sure that there are most of the publishing houses have portals to help you decide what is the best journal to submit your paper to. There are many websites. I think each company like Royal Society of Chemistry or Springer Nature or ACS, RSC, all of them have in Elsevier, they have a portal where they can help you decide whether your journal is appropriate, whether your submission is appropriate for that particular journal or not. Okay. Follow the journal's guidelines. So the guidelines, I can tell you, they're very detailed. Okay. They will tell you what is the limit of the abstract, how many words you can have in your title, what kind of words to avoid in your title. Okay. What is the limit word count that you can have as a limit in your introduction and your results and discussion. And they will tell you the size of the images, like what is the dimensions the images should be, what format the images should be, and what is the reference format to be followed. Okay. The reference format, the good thing about the reference format is that most of the reference managers like EndNote and Mendeley and Zotero, they will have styles. So when you use that in your Word document, it will automatically arrange it for that particular format. Okay. So this is a summary of a paper. This is a journey of a paper. Okay. How you do it, what are the things to keep in track of. Later, you can ask me any questions about this. Okay, selecting a journal for your manuscript. Okay, so let me just go briefly into this. See, more than impact factors are a good thing. Okay, fine. Yeah, they tell you how big a journal is, but you should not submit your paper only to a journal because it has a high impact factor. You have to look at whether it's relevant to that journal or not. Okay, so that is the first thing, because there are many journals. See, a lot of people in the scientific community, especially in America and Europe, I would say this is more in America. Okay, they are worried about tenure. So they're worried about whether they will get and after 5 years, whether they will be promoted to assistant professor or associate professor or something. So they tend to get into this panic mode and submit only to the highest impact factor journals. No matter what the quality of the work, they submit only to Nature Science first. It's torturous for both the professor and the student, because when you send it to these high impact factor journals, they receive thousands of publications. Thousands is a very underestimation, maybe more per day. So by the time somebody gets back to you, and even if your paper goes to review, it will take close to 6 months to 1 year. So we are talking about a long wait time. Okay. Whereas if you select your journal, if you select your submission for a journal that's more appropriate, that's very niche and talks about your particular kind of work very clearly, that is more efficient. You will hear back with them maximum 1 or 2 months. Okay. So it's important not to look at impact factors alone. Ask about the relevance of your, just look at the relevance of your work. How relevant is your paper to that particular journal? Okay. So if you want a large audience to read your paper, and if you feel that your findings are that groundbreaking, then you choose an international journal to reach a worldwide audience. Then I agree, yeah, you can go for Nature, ACS, any of those big journals, JACS and all those things. Okay. I'm talking from chemistry perspective, but of course there are other, like for people who do work in medicine, it might be different. Okay, if you think you're, like for example, we used to work in Iowa State. Corn is a very big deal in Iowa. Okay. Now it's a problem because corn is produced in a large quantity in Iowa, but not much used. Apart from making high fructose corn syrup, they don't use it for anything else. But recently, the Iowa State itself, they started giving state funds to find out if corn waste, corn cob, can be converted into biofuel. So when they give you that funding, you can write in a publication that's directly relevant to a state authority, right? So they can read that paper and they say, okay, this is valid for us, let's give them funding. So again, you can choose based on, if there is a local relevance to your paper, you can choose a journal that applies to that particular region or area also. Another example I can give you for locally is like, how Ayurveda is something that is only accepted here in India, right? So Ayurvedic studies will have more of a local appeal than a global appeal. Okay. So yeah, there are specialized journals and there are broad journals. Okay. If you're doing a very obscure spectroscopic technique, it's better to go for a specialized journal. Okay. And if your work is going to impact everybody, if it's going to have a cross-disciplinary effect, then choose a broad focus journal. Okay. So one thing is now, I will just quickly go through this. Okay. See, now the movement is going to be, in the future, it's going to be mostly open access, because there's everybody, mostly in Europe, you would have heard of this thing called Plan S. Most publishing entities and universities want all their research to be openly accessible to the whole world. Okay, that's how it's supposed to be, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. If I publish research and then somebody has to pay $50 to access a paper for only 48 hours. Okay. So right now these are the only two options, but in say for example, in countries like ours, in developing nations, open access is very hard because you have very high prices even for the journals, like for something like Nature Communications, which is a very broad-based journal. The cost in the US is around $3,000. I think it's less here in India, but it's still a lot of money. Okay, so you can choose the appropriate journal based on whether you want a subscription model or whether you want open access. If you can afford open access is always the better way to go. Okay, now I'll quickly go through what happens to your manuscript. Okay, how peer review, why some manuscripts it takes only like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and some manuscripts it takes almost 6 months, 1 year. Okay. So there are 3 parties involved in this, the publishing process: the author, which is you; the editor, who will see your cover letter and then decide where to send it further. Okay, and the reviewers. The reviewers are someone like you, who are also pursuing research, who also have their labs to run, who have their work to do. Okay, they are also busy people. Okay, they may have the time to read your manuscript immediately, or they may have 10 other manuscripts that they have to read. They may have their own students' manuscripts also to read. Okay, yeah. So first you're submitting your manuscript. Okay, after you submit your manuscript, it's going to the editor. Does it meet the basic requirements? Word count, title, abstract, everything. Does it follow the reference format? All those things. Okay. If it's no, it's going to be sent back to you. Like if the reference format is not correct, that's why I said, you revise your paper at least 30 times with your boss, with your PI. Make sure it meets the basic requirements so that there is no delay in your manuscript moving to the next stage. Okay. If yes, he'll assign it to reviewers, or what the editor will do is he'll assign it to a sub-editor, and another editor will be assigned and he will assign to the reviewers. Okay. So then it goes to the reviewer. They make evaluations and they look at they read the paper, they tell you what is missing, what is incomplete. They give you suggestions. After reviewing, your paper generally improves a lot. It becomes much better because they see things that you cannot. They're not biased, right? You're biased to your work because maybe you're doing it for like 2 to 3 years, right? So most reviewers will either give a minor revision or they'll give a major revision, or some people will outright reject it based on how relevant they think the paper is for that journal. Okay. So once they evaluate and recommend, they'll give you a comments. You have to address the comments. What the editor generally does, he gives you some time. You please address his comments. You take some time. If you want an extension, you please let us know. So after you get the comments, okay, and you address those comments and you send it back to the editor, what he will do is he will make a decision, or even the reviewers will make a decision, but they will say whether to reject it or not. Okay. Sometimes in the first round of review itself, if more than one reviewer says reject his manuscript, or that it's not in the top 10% of the papers published in this field, then at the assess comments section itself, the editor will reject your paper. Okay. So sometimes he may make the decision and say no. But if he says revise, he will give you some time. Like I said, they'll give you some 1 or 2 months, or how much ever time you need to revise the manuscript. And then you go through the whole process again. Submit the manuscript. Okay. And he goes through the whole cycle. Like generally what happens after you revise, if he says that minor revisions, major revisions, it's all good, it goes back to the editor, it goes to the reviewers again. And if they say accept it, fine, your paper's accepted. Okay. So I hope this is clear to everyone. So this is the general process. If you're asking why sometimes the paper takes 6 months and then 1 month, or 1 week or 2 weeks, sometimes a year entirely. It depends on the journal. It depends on the journal. It depends on the main person holding this back, which is the reviewer. Okay, if the reviewer is someone who's busy, or if he has some other things to do, they will delay the process. And there is no saying how that can happen. There is no hard and fast way to streamline this process. It's just how it is. Okay, so I would say be patient and keep your eyes open for anything that happens. So yeah, usually sometimes this is a very optimistic thing. Okay, first decision within a week. That happens generally only if you're getting a rejection directly from the editor. What happens in many of these big journals, the high impact journals, the editor will hang on to your paper for 14 days. And then he will say, sorry, I'm not sending this further to the reviewers. Okay. For example, every time we suggested to this, we used to submit in my group when I joined a PI who was starting out, like he and I were starting our time at Iowa State at the same time. So he was a very junior faculty. So every time we would submit a paper to this journal called JAX, we would get a rejection within 24 hours. So that means the editor saw it and he decided, okay, this is not fit for my journal. I'm sending it back to you. Okay, so that's fast. It's actually, that kind of rejection is good because you immediately know which you have to move on to something else. But when we used to submit papers to science or nature, most of the time, it'll just be lying with the editor for 14 days. Okay, he wouldn't have read it. He would not have sent it to reviewers. He would not have sent it to anybody. But after 14 days, he will just reject it. Okay. Or sometimes in the case of nature, they will give you a suggestion to go to some smaller journal in their family of journals. Okay. So go for impact and not impact factor. See how relevant your paper is to that journal. Okay. So if your paper passes the test, the editor will ask somebody who's an experienced person in their field. What they generally do nowadays is, because there are so many papers being published, they give the paper to a sub-editor, somebody who's in that field. Like an editor will be the main guy in that journal, and they'll have sub-editors who are specifically masters of that particular field. Okay, so that's why it's important you put those keywords and the abstract and the title. When they see certain topics, they'll say, okay, I can send this to this sub-editor. Okay. So, okay, maybe I'm using the wrong term, not sub-editor, but what I'm saying is there'll be one major editor for the journal and there'll be a number of other editors who are specified to work in certain fields, like they're specialists in that field. Okay. So yeah, remember that all these people, right, they are reading a lot of papers. So that's why I'm telling you, it can vary. The amount of time it takes for your paper to come back from the reviewing process, it can vary from 1 week to 1 year. And again, there is no fixed rule about how many reviewers are going to be assigned to a paper. Sometimes they'll assign 1 or 2 reviewers, and sometimes they'll assign 3 reviewers, but only 2 reviewers will give you feedback. So it's down to whether those 2 reviewers both accept your paper or if one rejects and one accepts. So it's not a streamlined process. Okay. So this is something that you should be very, very careful about when you're replying to your reviewers. Most of them, you don't know who they are. It's a blind review. Most of the review is blind. Okay. So they are full-time professors or department heads like you, working in institutions, guiding students, or sometimes they may even be postdocs, postdoctoral scholars, or PhD students themselves. Okay. So sometimes journal editors do take up this job if they're specialists in the field. Okay. So you have to understand the time aspect of this. So the way referees are chosen is experience in the field. How is their technical expertise? See, generally what the editor will ask is that, can you, when he's giving it to a reviewer, he will ask you. So I have experience with this. So when I was assigned papers to review, the editor will specifically tell me, okay, listen, you have a 10-day turnaround. Can you do this? If I say no, he'll send it to somebody else. Okay. But sometimes you may say, yes, I will give it within 10 days, but there's no guarantee. Okay. So think of all those things. He may be going through a number of researchers who will agree or disagree to review the paper. Some researchers request as much as 4 weeks to review a paper because they have their work to do too, right? Okay. So mostly journals, referees are chosen based on how, like if you keep rejecting every paper they send you, then the editor is going to get an idea of what kind of person you are, whether you generally not respecting research at all. So then he will send you less and less papers. So the way editors do their job is they choose editors who will give a very unbiased review of the paper. Okay. So yeah, so there are some other pitfalls that I want to tell you. Even if sometimes the reviewers say like minor revision and the other person says major revision, it's the editor's call finally. He can see two people who've given major revision and one person having given a minor revision, and the editor can take the call of rejecting the paper. So don't be surprised if this happens. So it's like I said, right? The process is not streamlined. So you have to always have a number of list of paper journals in which you want to submit your paper. Okay. Rejection is, at least in my lab, we used to adopt a high risk process where we used to, regardless of the merit of the work, we used to send it to high risk journals, like high impact factor journals. So obviously rejections are going to be more. Okay. So sometimes there is also possible that your reviewer will go to 2 stages of reviewing. After the first set of 3 reviewers, it may go to more reviewers also. Okay, so these are so a PhD is not an easy process. So these are all things you need to be expecting. Okay. So like I said, the people who are doing these referee reports, who are reviewing your paper, are also professors, students, or postdoctoral scholars. So you have to be polite. Even if they are rude to you, some referees do tend to get very rude. Okay, they will just discard your 3 or 4 years of work and say, this is nonsense, I don't think this should be published. That doesn't mean you respond in the same way. You should be as polite as possible, because that will affect how you do the experiment and how they look at you when you send in your revised manuscript. Okay. And if you feel like if a reviewer asks you a question as to why you didn't do this, you can be gentle. You can be very polite about saying, okay, sir, we thank the reviewer for pointing this out, but this is out of the scope of our work, and that is why we didn't include it, and we may include it in a future manuscript. Okay. So when you submit back a revision, again, you're going to send a letter to the editor. Okay. So in the referee letter, it's in the referee document itself, where you reply to the reviewers, you have to say which page you made the changes requested by the reviewer. Okay, like, so when the person is reviewing your manuscript for the second time, he should be able to go to that exact location and say that, okay, this person has made the change I requested. So he should be satisfied. He should not have to read the whole manuscript again to see what he pointed out earlier. Okay. So generally the format for a reply, both in the letter and in your referee comments, is you address the reviewer directly and tell him, okay, thank you for pointing this out. I've made this change on this page, on this paragraph, under this section, as per the reviewer's recommendation. Okay, so it makes his job easier. Both the editor and the reviewer will feel like you address the specific point they pointed out. Okay. So no, normally what people do, this is a bad thing to do. If you only say what you did and not say what they are and where you made them, that is wasting the time of the reviewer and the editor also. Okay. So the more you help them in that single document, that letter itself, to the editor and to the reviewers, the more you tell them, okay, this is what we did, they don't have to go through the whole manuscript again. Okay. So what a journal editor is looking for. And if you feel like if the reviewer has made an important point, you say, yes, we thank the reviewer for this. We completely missed this. And we've done this and this experiment to address what the reviewers pointed out to us. If you disagree, you tell them, we are sorry, politely, okay, that we don't agree with you, because we have seen other researchers do this. You must have some backup as to why you disagree with them. Okay, you can, maybe you didn't cite it before in your earlier version of the paper, but you can cite them now and tell them, okay, this is the change I made to tell you why we didn't do this and why we disagree with you as the reviewer. Again, the politeness aspect is very important. Okay. So yeah, state the new experiment, how you revise the text and figures. Okay, all this is important. Okay. So if you can point out page and line numbers, see, generally when a manuscript goes for review, it's formatted in a way that it has line numbers. Okay. So it has a line number for every line, and you can easily identify it. If a person is told, okay, on this page, I made this change on this line, the reviewer can quickly go to that and do it. That's the format. If you notice any submission that comes back from the reviewing process, you'll notice that the template has these line numbers along the manuscript. Okay, keep a watch out for that. So if you can point out exactly where that was made, you're helping the reviewer, and you're making it faster, your publication process faster. Okay. So this is not recommended generally. Okay. Appealing after rejection. Like, say for example, you submitted your paper, it was accepted by the editor, it went to the reviewers said minor or major revision, and then the editor rejected your paper. Okay. In the case of an appeal, you have to do something radically new to make the paper appealing, like to say that, okay, and even then what's going to happen is the paper is going to go back to the reviewing process. Okay. So I can tell you a story again of one of my final papers when I was in the US, when I was in Iowa State, when I was graduating. We had submitted a paper to science. Okay. It had gone through the reviewing stage. What we didn't realize is that somebody had published the exciting first time result that we thought we had published 1 month before us in a different journal. Okay. And that journal was not a very high impact factor journal, but it's a very reputed journal, Chem Phys Chem. Okay. So basically the novelty of our work was lost, and the honesty, we had to be honest to the editor and tell him, okay, listen, we thought we were doing this for the first time, but 1 month ago, somebody else has done this. Although their catalyst is not as efficient as ours. But since the novelty is gone, it can't go into science anymore. So that affected the reviewing process. What happened was when the reviewers finally saw it, we had to do a new experiment. We had to show that this thing can be, so basically it was using these nanoparticles to make MRI signals higher. Okay. Like when you're going for a medical checkup. So we had to actually we had to do an additional experiment and show that this is highly impactful. That yes, we did the MRI experiment. So now our work is back to being novel. But again, when it went to the reviewers, it was rejected. Okay, because it's not as groundbreaking as we made it out to be. So you can appeal this, but after a point, the editor is going to tell you, sorry, I don't think you should go here. Okay. So you can be as polite as you can, but don't resort into angry attacks or arrogant attacks saying, how can you reject our work? How can you do this? No, none of that. Be graceful about accepting rejection if you've tried your best. So yeah, this is, I think this is a popular graphic. Everybody would have seen this. Okay. There's a lot of obstacles. It's not easy, but it's worth the process, because by the time you come through this, when you get through your first manuscript, you understand the value of your research. The important thing is publishing your research, right? Getting it out, whether low impact factor or high impact factor. It's important to first publish your research. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that, impact factors are decided by international institutions like Clarivate Analytics or Thomson Reuters. Okay. So the one thing I would like to address is be careful of predatory journals. I have a list. I have a website you can go to check on what are predatory journals. Please avoid them. And the way you know a journal is predatory is if they send you an email and ask you have to pay so much to publish in their paper. Okay, there are a lot of these journals in India. You should be very careful of these. And they will be addressing PhD students as doctor, professor. Okay, you will see some red flags. So you should be careful of those red flags and make sure you don't, just accept the person's offer to publish in their journal. Okay. So I'll quickly go through plagiarism, citations, and open. I think I already spoke about open access, right? Okay. So plagiarism is basically you're copying somebody else's work. That is a strict no-no. Okay. If you don't know how to write a manuscript, start taking classes from the beginning of your PhD or anywhere. Okay. English is going to be hard for anybody. I'm not going to deny it. Especially scientific writing is hard. But most universities conduct classes for this. There are YouTube lectures on this. There are reading materials for this. So please avoid copying content. That is the end of your research career if you indulge in plagiarism. Okay. So Yeah, but try most of the cases of plagiarism that I've seen are people who have great data in the results and discussion section, but then they copy the introduction. Okay, that's why I told you, right? You write your introduction last because that is the most painstaking part. You have to do a literature review of all the research that has been published in that field. So take your time and write the introduction. The easiest part to write is your results, methods, results and discussion, and your conclusion. Okay, last you can come to your abstract and your introduction. Okay, there are people who copied entire abstracts also, which is not worth it. You're invalidating your hard work by copying a few passages for an introduction, which doesn't make any sense. Okay, so most universities should have this thing called Authenticate. Okay, it's a subscription-based service. So when you write a manuscript, mostly this is for PIs. Okay, most PIs should have the software that can check if a paper has been plagiarized, if the writing of the student has been plagiarized. Okay, so yeah, there are a lot of publishing houses that offer editing and consultation services. That is also another route. I think most universities should have a library facility where they will help in editing your manuscripts. Or if you have a network of friends or peers, I would recommend that you use their help to do this instead of plagiarizing stuff. Okay, so I think you guys are aware of this, right? Plagiarism, data manipulation is hurting India's research a lot. And we are kind of notorious around the world for this. Like when I went as a PhD student first to the US, my initial instructors were worried I was plagiarizing my stuff, like whatever reports I was giving. So that's the kind of, we should try to walk away. Mostly people suspect us of plagiarism, mostly from China and most of the Southeast Asian countries like us. So please put effort into your writing. Okay. So your citations are something that if you have a Google Scholar profile, a citation is basically telling you how many times your paper has been cited. Okay. So a H index will tell you, like if you have 115 papers, they've been cited 115 times. Okay. Since 2014, 67 papers of Professor Albert Einstein have been cited 67 times. An I-10 index is when you have a paper that's been cited at least 10 times. Okay. So don't look at your research, someone's research by the metrics. I mean, always look at the value that they're individually giving to your work. Okay. But citations are a good thing. It's just a metric. Okay. Open access publishing, I think you know that basically the onus of publishing, paying the publisher's fees is on the researcher or the institution. But the paper is free to everyone to read. Okay. Yeah, there are many benefits. Okay. Like right now, I'm sure a lot of people use very different routes to get papers which are behind paywalls. I'm sure you're familiar with those ways. But there are, in the future, at least I hope in the next 10 years that open access is going to become more popular. Okay. So the one good thing about open access is the aspect of citing it. It will be cited more often if your paper is open access because more people can read it, more people can benefit from it. Okay. And it's published very fast. The reviewing process also is very fast. So yeah, I'll go quickly through this. Okay. Identifying a trustworthy journal. This is to avoid predatory journals. Okay. There are certain publishing houses, ACS, Springer Nature, PLOS One, everything. There's some, even Hindawi right now. Hindawi initially used to be predatory journals, but now they've slowly, improved their reputation a little bit. Okay. So I would say focus on the reputable publisher because editorial board, you can check if the editor is someone who has done his PhD in a very good place, who's a very good professor, who's in a reputable institution. You can look at the editor of the journal and that will tell you the whole picture of what kind of journal that journal itself is. Okay. So indexed by common databases, I'm talking about like Web of Science and all those things. Okay. These are the ones that will tell you whether the journal is worthy of reading or not. So again, the authors, use Google Scholar, use Web of Science, use Scopus to check these authors, see their other publications. So that way you'll know, because I can tell you for a fact that none of the top researchers in the world will be publishing their work in predatory journals. Okay. And this is another thing. Okay, a predatory journal will usually tell you to pay upfront, which means that no matter what the reviewing process is, your paper will be published. So that kind of devalues your work. Okay, they will address you as doctor, professor. Do you want to? We are having an issue on this. Would you like to come and publish in our paper? Okay, don't fall for that. Especially if they send you an email directly first. Okay. So there's this website you can use, thinkchecksubmit.org. It will tell you. It will give you like a basic idea of whether this journal is trustworthy or not. Okay. So this is another list. You can take. I'll be sending this presentation anyway. But the Beals list, it has an up-to-date list of all the predatory journals. Okay. You can go check it out, and on a daily basis, they keep on updating what are the kind of journals that are indulging in this kind of activity. So you can go check it out. I think there are many other lists like this, but please, this is one of the most lists that I found is very reliable. Yeah, so that's about it. Okay, so I will take some questions now. I hope I've not overshot my time. But yeah, any questions on what I've discussed so far? Please go ahead.
Yes, we can take few questions. So one of the question is that, which is a best reference manager? Can you suggest a best reference manager?
For me, EndNote, but I know it's not free because for me, the reason EndNote is useful is because it's integrated into Microsoft Word. But even EndNote has its problems because sometimes after you use the reference manager and you close the document and you open it again, the formatting goes askew. So I use EndNote only to put the references in the manuscript. And then later I switch off the plugin in the Microsoft Word. And then I do it manually. I look carefully. I go, even if I have 150 to 200 references, I look very carefully at the references and I make sure they adhere to the format expected by the journal. Okay, so EndNote is good, but I know it's not free. Mendeley is good too. And then there is Zotero. Most people use Zotero, I think, which is free. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've been using EndNote.
Igna, are there any more questions?
Yeah, there is one question where the researcher is asking, are the writing styles different for sciences and social sciences?
I don't think so, man, because basically the journal will have its own format, right? So the writing style is going to be the same because even the social sciences, if I'm right, you're going to carry out a test in the field. You're going to be gathering data and then you're going to be talking to people about certain aspects of a phenomenon. And then you're going to put a convincing argument in a paper, which is going to be reviewed by other people in the field. So the template, what I've discussed in my talk, is the same. It doesn't change much. You still have to have an abstract. You still have to have a title. You still have to have some sort of graphical abstract. Sometimes, maybe some people don't expect graphical abstract. Some journals don't accept it. But most journals that in my field, they expect a graphical abstract. But your results and discussion is, again, you're going to be discussing data. And finally, you have to make an conclusion also, right? So it will go through a reviewing process. So I think it's kind of similar. The writing style is going to be similar. Maybe the reviewing process will be more for social sciences.
There might be some journal specific things, but otherwise broadly it remains the same, right?
Broadly, the methodology remains the same. Your data must be compiled first. Your methods, because social sciences is basically looking at phenomena that affect our daily lives and the global perspective, right? So it's still data collection. So you're going to be collecting some numbers to convince people of some phenomena. So I'm sure it's the same.
There was one question on plagiarism detection software. So I think you have already answered it in your session.
Yeah, there's this software called Authenticate. But again, the problem with Authenticate is it's not free. So see, because ultimately what's going to happen is when a PI asks a student to write a manuscript, he has 10 such students like this. He cannot go through every single manuscript and wonder who has copied or who has not copied. Like, for example, even my recent experience, we were writing a 30-page review. In the review, because the PI was asking for the manuscript fast from the first year student, there was one section he had copied. 3 pages continuously had been copied. So that's dangerous because it's a review going to a reputed journal. And if the professor had not used Authenticate, which I believe the university bought licenses to, that paper would have gone as such, and it would have been embarrassing for us during the review process. So I don't know what universities are doing. What I think this mainly falls to librarians and think to arrange for this kind of authentication software. But every person should have, even if their manuscript is written entirely originally by themselves, they should run it through Authenticate or similar software.
There is one more question, that how is the graphical abstract differ from TOC graphics?
It's the same thing. It's another name for the same thing. So the graphical abstract is basically the table of contents graph. It's the same. It's a different name for the same thing.
Okay.
So when you go to the journal's page, when you go to the journal's homepage, for example, AC's Catalysis, the first thing you'll see on the page on all the published articles in the latest volume or whatever it is the graphical abstract or the TOC and the abstract itself and the title. Maybe the title and the graphical abstract. When you click on that, you'll probably see the abstract also. So TOC, graphical abstract, same thing.
So is there any tool which can be used for this graphical abstract? I mean,
so people can use Adobe Illustrator, whatever. I'm not very familiar, but in my group, what we did was we had this 3D software. It was called 3ds Max. I think I'll type it down there so that everyone can see it. 3ds Max. Yeah, if people, I mean, it depends on them. There are many softwares for this. There are very free software. 3ds Max is expensive. It's not free.
okay.
But there are many other softwares that you can use. But it's up to the creativity of the authors, how good a graphical abstract they can make. You can use PowerPoint also to make an amazing graph. But it's up to them.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, Meghna?
No, I think that's all. There is one on citations. How can citations be monitored? But I think there we have a separate session on metrics and other things. So it will be answered gradually in the course of the.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it audible?
Yes.
Can I ask one question, sir?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, how reliable this software who are checking the plagiarism, they are not storing our manuscripts? Because sometimes what happens, some free softwares are there in internet, they are checking the plagiarism, but they are copying it, the manuscript.
Oh.
Is it kind of things are there?
I'm not aware, sir, but that's why I would say, see, basically what the software does is it has access to something online already. Okay, which is if the publication of the paper is already online, the software has access to that. Even if you submit, even if you put your document out there, okay, when you're checking to authenticate, within 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be submitting it for your manuscript for publishing, right?
Generally, not always, sir, actually, because sometimes what we will do, we'll prepare it and some data may be remaining for processing the experiment. So sometime re-authenticate. So this process happens because research is ongoing process. And sometimes what happens when we will give it to our friends for checking it out also. So that time also this situation occurs. So there is not always a 2 or 3 weeks for just uploading.
Sir, I would say that generally, see, Authenticate doesn't require to upload the document. At least I don't think it's that way, okay? But if you upload your document to some random online things, then yes, that's risky. I would not recommend doing that at all. Because what happens is then your document is being stored online without your permission. And freely accessible to everyone else. Like there are these things called what? Bitly, no, I don't know. There are some places where you are asked to access one document, you are asked to upload another document. So I would not recommend that you upload documents that are, like of such a critical nature onto websites like this.
Okay.
So that is why I think these softwares are expensive. Like Authenticate doesn't require you to upload it. What it will do is it will check your document against what is already online. So it will go through your document, but it won't store a copy of it unless you eventually put it up online.
Okay. So that was my worry actually, sir, because
I would not. If it's a very important critical document, and you feel you're going to be publishing it soon, and if you're worried about other people copying it, then do not upload it to any file storing websites online.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
For an extremely informative and systematic presentation. This session was extremely helpful in understanding the process of publishing and also in understanding.
Somebody's asked a question about DFT.
Yeah.
So DFT, I will just answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
So DFT is something, density functional theory is, people do PhDs on DFT. Okay, so you have to find a group that specializes in DFT, density functional theory. And we generally use it to explain chemical phenomena that we have experimental data for, but don't have a generalized theory to arrive at. So we always collaborate with somebody else who's an expert on this. So for example, in Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, Professor Umesh Wagmare, he is one of the top scientists in the country, and his research is entirely on density functional theory. And all his students do their PhD in density functional theory. It's basically physical chemistry discipline. And it's computational chemistry, and people who do PhDs in DFT take close to 6 to 7 years. It's very, very intensive. Okay. So generally what we do is we do the major work, and then we give the DFT component to someone who's a specialist in that area, and most probably we won't understand what the DFT was about. Okay. It will give a generalized conclusion at the end. So DFT is something you have to learn. It will take time. You need a computer that can kind of provide the resources for that. You can't just use the computers that we're using right now. You need a very high intensity computer. Yeah, those computers cost close to 2 to 3 lakhs, maybe more. So yeah, I hope that answers the question about DFT.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for answering my question. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure. Yeah.
So we thank you very much, sir, for an extremely informative and systematic presentation. The session was extremely helpful in understanding the process of publishing and also in understanding what the researcher needs to take care of so that one increases the chances of his or her paper getting accepted. Tips like for early career researchers, like from where you should actually start writing your paper, how to work on the title, abstract and keywords were very valuable. Also understanding the reviewer's side, knowing the expectations of the editor was helpful for reducing the pitfalls for the researchers, and how to affirmatively communicate with the publishing team was of course very helpful. And knowing about the S-plan, predatory journals, I think would be very useful for researchers while choosing their journals. So extremely useful session. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Over to you, Meghna.
Our next session is on choice of publication avenue. As a researcher, it is very important for us to know how to publish for your research work, how it will impact the career advancement, the funding opportunities, and the professional reputations for years to come. It is therefore very important to analyze every aspect of the journal submission instead of relying on just one resource. We need to use more than one resource and various tools to identify the right avenue. So for this, we have Dr. Shubhashri Nag with us, who is a senior consultant at Clarivate Analytics. She has completed her MPharm from the Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai, and PhD from Texas Tech University of Health Sciences, USA. Her postdoctoral training is from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, USA. A pharmacologist and toxicologist by training, she has more than 8 years of research experience in anti-cancer drug discovery and pharmacokinetics area. With 25 peer-reviewed publications having more than 1,100 citations, she at Clarivate Analytics is currently involved in user engagement, conducting author workshops, and creating strategy for research capacity building. Her other interests include community outreach in science education, scientific writing, and bibliometric evaluation. We welcome you, Dr. Subhashri, for this session. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Meghna. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you for the very warm introduction, and thank you for the invitation too. Please give me a moment as I share my screen with you all.
Yes, the screen.
And is visible, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I had the opportunity to sit in Dr. Vamshi's lecture, and Dr. Vamshi has covered quite a few about do's and don'ts, and we will be just reiterating some of them in detail. So today's talk will follow the agenda. We'll talk about how do we understand the common criteria for selecting the right journal for publications. I will be actually talking about the journal impact factor a lot. And then what are the other tools which are there to find the best fit journal? And we'll also talk about how we can avoid falling prey to predatory journals. I think we'll all agree that one of the things that we look at while deciding where I should be publishing and where we should be publishing is a very critical question, right? I have the manuscript with me. Now I need to make sure that I publish in the right avenue so that the right people can see my publication. One thing is, of course, the scope. So there are two facets here. Please remember, one is that you are looking at a publication source that allows you, that has a good pragmatic chance of your manuscript being accepted. And second is that you also need to publish in a source where your publication will get the recognition it deserves. So in order to increase the chance for your manuscript to be selected, the main thing that you must look at is the scope. Now, here there is a small caveat. Typically, if you look at the scope, now I have taken, for example, this journal, Energy and Environmental Sciences. It's a highly well-known and highly regarded journal in the field. And if you look at the scope of the journal, as you can see on the screen, it's a very broad scope. It talks about publishing in energy conversion and storage, alternative fuel technologies, and it talks about interdisciplinary research. So the scope is very broad. And typically, you will notice that the scope for journals, even if it belongs to a certain specified niche area, it is not very clear cut. You as an author may feel slightly inundated that will my article really get accepted here or not. So how do you surpass this particular problem? So Dr. Vamshi talked about databases like Web of Science. There are databases, even Google Scholar. So any literature review database that you can, get hold of, please go to that literature database and try to have a look at the kind of publications that are being published in that particular journal, at least in the past 2 years. And have a look at what are the kind of experimentation, what is that overarching theme that has been there, and does your manuscript fit over here? So I'll give an example from my own field. Almost a decade ago, when I was a master's student, more than a decade ago actually, there's a journal called Journal of Controlled Release. It's a well-regarded journal in the area of drug delivery and pharmaceutics. And around 12 to 13 years ago, if you had to publish in that journal, all you needed was very detailed physicochemical characterization of a formulation that you made. There was no need for any kind of in vivo or animal work. Now the perspective has changed. Today, if you look at the articles that are being published in that journal, you will notice increasingly sophisticated techniques like confocal microscopy. You will notice techniques like electron microscopy, etc., which are being used for confirming the results present. It is supplemented by detailed, in vivo animal work. So what do we understand? The focus of the publications in the journal has changed. And today, if you want to submit an article to this journal, you should be ready with animal data to supplement your other findings. So for as a researcher, very important to see whether there are certain kind of experiments that other publications, other articles in that journal have been doing. Does my article fit that scope or not? So just do not look at the scope statement on the journal website. Also do a deep dive of the papers that have been published recently, at least for the past 2 years, and try to see any overarching theme that is there. Uh, are there any particular statistical analysis? Are there any particular experimentation or techniques that the publications are using? And ensure that your manuscript kind of fits the general mode. That is a scope. Next is publisher reputation. I'm sure all of us look at the publisher, and this is a very, very important criteria for selecting the right journal. Not only and is a publisher reputed, you could be publishing. There are several publishers which are not very well known, maybe outside a particular geography. There are Indian publishers. Not every publisher has to be a publishing behemoth like Nature Society or Elsevier or Wiley. But at the same time, do an analysis. Is there any bad review, associated with the publisher? What do the publishers do? What other journals are they publishing? What are these journals indexed on citation databases like Web of Science? Please remember these citation databases like Web of Science actually, have a very strict editorial control. They do not index any journal just like that. They have subject matter experts, editors who are subject matter experts in their own right, and these editors look for problems in peer review process, editorial integrity, etc. So if a journal is indexed on a well-reputed database like Web of Science, you can be assured about the quality. You can be assured that yes, it seems that this is a good journal. You can be assured of the publisher's reputation. See how many journals does this publisher have on Web of Science. You will notice well-known publishers typically have most of their journals. They will have an editorial process of their own that ensures that most of their journals are indexed on these well-known databases. Another thing that you can look at is it a for-profit publisher or is it a scientific society? Does the scientific society have some kind of currency within the community? For example, American Chemical Society. They are a for-profit publisher today, but they started out being the biggest chemical engineer or chemist organization. So they started off as a chemical society, and you have the Royal Society of Chemistry. So all of these journals, often when they start from a publishing house, which started off as a society, they are more concerned with the quality of research reported therein, and that could also be a very good criterion for before selecting a journal. Of course, the type of articles published. So if you want to publish a review article, but this journal only publishes for original research articles, obviously you cannot do so. Again, there are certain journals. For example, in organic chemistry, you have tetrahedron letters versus tetrahedron. So one of them is for more detailed publications where there is more data. Typically, journals which are toxicology letters, these are journals which will publish shorter communications. So if you have a paper where it doesn't have a huge amount of data or it is not that rigorous a study, You can decide to publish in journals which are so-called letters journals, or which publish rapid communications. These are very common in the area of, chemistry. The next and the most important thing I think every researcher looks at is the journal impact factor. Without fail, we talk about the journal impact factor a lot when deciding what and where should we be publishing. But I'm sure a lot of us are not very aware of exactly what is the journal impact factor or what exactly does it mean. Now, the journal impact factor has been developed by Clarivate Analytics. And what it basically does, it's a citation-based metric. So for a particular year, let's say I'm calculating the journal impact factor for the year 2017, as I've shown here. Then what I will be doing is that I will be seeing in that particular journal how many articles have been published. Articles are known as citable items. So typically, a letter to the editor would not be a citable item. Citable items are full-length research articles as well as reviews. So the number of citable articles in the past 2 years to the year of analysis. So if I'm calculating the journal impact factor in 2019, I am going to be looking at the years 2017 and 2018. So how many articles have been published in those 2 previous years? And the numerator has how many citations do these articles published in the 2 previous years accrued in the current year, right? So basically, it is a measure of the number of citations that these articles are getting. It's a citation-based metric. So obviously, higher the number of the arithmetic number of journal impact factor, higher are the number of citations that the journal is getting. Now, because it's a ratio, then obviously lower the number of articles that have been published in the years of analysis, higher will be your absolute value, right? So which are the journals that have a high journal impact factor? These are journals which are extremely exclusive because they have high rejection rates. They will publish only a few number of papers, and these papers are very influential in the field because they are getting cited. One thing I want to again reiterate is that please remember, citations are just one metric that explain or give you a flavor of the quality of research. They are very important. In fact, the only quantifiable metric of the quality of research right now that we have are citations. Because citations are formal acknowledgement by your scientific peers about the influence and quality of your research, right? And the journal citation reports, which publishes the journal impact factor, is actually a very transparent platform. You can even see where are the citations coming from, how the calculation has been done. So it's a very transparent platform, and that's the reason why it is very highly regarded in the field. But there is a problem. Now, let's say you have 2 subjects, how do you know a particular journal impact factor is a good journal impact factor? So for example, let me talk about pharmaceutical sciences. What would you, as a pharmaceutical scientist, if there any one of you amongst the, attendees are, what would you classify as a good impact factor? 4, 5, 6? There are subjects like mathematics where the top 10% of the journals in mathematics indexed on Web of Science have an impact factor as low as 1. So for a mathematician to be publishing in a journal impact factor of 3.45 is very aspirational. Whereas for somebody in the biological science, especially if it is cell biology, that's the median. There are 50% of journals in this category of cell biology which have an impact factor more than 3. Please remember, citations depend upon the subject area. There are certain subjects like material sciences, nanosciences, biochemistry, or biological sciences, which are highly cited. They are interdisciplinary subjects. A lot of people are working in it. They are high research output subjects, and there are many more journals associated, and the number of citations is also very high. So the impact factors in those journals, the journal belonging to those categories, is also very high. So just the number of does not signify the quality of a journal. So please remember, journal impact factor depends on subject. What is important is understanding the rank in category. Now, for example, I have here 4 journals. Toxicology letters, current medicinal chemistry, onco-target, current cancer drug targets. If you just look at these numbers, they are almost, for toxicology letters and current medicinal chemistry, it's almost the same, right? But toxicology letters is Q1, or it is in the top 25% of the journals in the subject area of toxicology, whereas in the area of medicinal chemistry uh, and biochemistry and molecular biology, current medicinal chemistry, which is very similar arithmetic impact factor now. It is quartile 2, or in the bottom, in the second 25 to 50%. It's not in the top 25%. So what is very important when you're trying to decide whether this is a good journal, should I be publishing over here, look at the quartile. In fact, for a lot of faculty and early career researchers and students who are attending today's session, please remember ranking agencies like NIRF, or even when the governmental agencies require reports, accreditation agencies, etc. They are looking at how many of your papers are in the so-called quartile 1 journals, Q1, quartile 1 journals. Okay, so don't focus too much on the sheer arithmetic number. Make sure that your journals are in maybe the top 10% of your subject category or top 25%. Right, the rank of the journal in a particular subject category is more important than just the journal impact factor. Another thing is that the journal impact factor by itself cannot stand in as a surrogate marker of the quality of research, because this is just evaluating where this journal is in a particular subject with regards to the number of citations that the papers in that journal have got. Okay, so it doesn't really tell you, just because a person has been consistently publishing in a particular, in a top quartile journals, doesn't mean that their papers are performing very well with citation, or these papers are impactful, they've contributed to other discoveries. That requires a much more deeper dive. So again, keep the journal impact factor in mind, but it also needs to be supplemented with ranking category and quartile. So I think we have already talked about it, that the Q1 are the top positioning journals, where the Q4 are bottom positioning journals. Many times some journals might not have received an impact factor, because please remember, the way the editorial team at Clarivate works is that they look for a journal to have global citation impact. Who is publishing over there? What is the citation impact of the authors, the editorial board? Where are the citations for for the articles in the journal coming from? Now there could be journals which publish in very niche areas. So for example, just a hypothetical example, I have a journal that publishes case studies on malaria or dengue and other mosquito-borne diseases in the western part of India. This could be an extremely important journal for the medical community in Maharashtra, right? Because mosquito-borne illnesses are a big endemic problem in India. So this might be a well-regarded journal in the medical community. But will this journal have a lot of international impact? Maybe not, because the content in this journal is not necessarily interesting to a medical professional in Western Europe. where they do not have, incidences of such tropical, mosquito vector-borne diseases at all. So how, if you are just looking at the presence of an impact factor or not, does not really give you the right picture of the utility and the standing of the journal. So when you are looking for a journal to publish in, please look at impact factor, absolutely, but also see what is the community, what is your community. A very good example here is something a lot of biology students will be familiar with. There's a journal called as Journal of Biological Chemistry, JBC. You know, I'm not sure if many of you have heard about that journal, but that journal is notoriously difficult to get into. Their reviewers are very tough. There are multiple rounds of revision, and the articles published in JBC are highly regarded. um, However, the journal has an impact factor, if I'm not mistaken, around 2-3 years ago it was around 5 point something. Not the highest, not as good as Cell, but a highly regarded journal. There are also journals with multidisciplinary journals. You have journals like Scientific Reports, etc., which, because they are multidisciplinary, different fields, they often have they publish many papers, they have higher impact factors. But if you are a biological chemist working on certain cell cycle proteins, it's a better idea to publish a in JBC, where your target audience is more likely to come across your paper than in a bigger multidisciplinary journal. So when you are publishing, it has to be a balance of these metrics plus understanding who your target audience is. When we evaluate a scientist, the scientists are evaluated not just on basis of how many citations they have, in terms of the H index. You'll be very surprised to know, and you can do it right now. Just see the H index of Donna Strickland, who was last year's physics Nobel laureate. It is her H index is not that high. She doesn't have 70,000, 50,000 citations, but she has made a real impact in the area of laser physics. So the point here is your analysis of where you should publish should be informed by what is the standard in your community, in your peers, who your target audience is, and of course citation metrics. So it has to be a combination of all these metrics together. Each one of them should complement the other, and only one metric taken in isolation will not give you the right decision. So I'm looking for, if some of your objectives are selection of the best fit journal. So we are looking for internationally recognized journals, Web of Science, JCR, even other citation databases like Scopus. These are good areas to find high quality international journals. By the way, citation databases also give you information about the quartile and rank of the journal in the category. At the same time, they also have analytical features whereby you can search for a particular well-known author in your field and see what are their publication patterns, right? So let us say, for example, I'm an ICT alum, and I would like to understand in the area of chemical engineering, where should I be publishing? I'll probably look at some of the stalwarts from ICT, Professor Yadav, Professor Gopte, where are they publishing, to have an idea that what are the journals which are being favored by some of the top productive scientists in the country. So look at the citation metrics, also use these websites to gain an understanding of where are the key opinion leaders in the field publishing. You can get information about journal ranking and percentile and quartile in Web of Science and JCR. There's a metric called immediacy index. Many journals have this metric written on their website. The Journal Citation Reports has a feature that gives you the immediacy index. Immediacy index is nothing but a weighted average that tells you, based on historical data, what is the probability that within 1 year you will get your publication cited. So basically, this is a metric which talks about how contemporary is the research that is being, published in a journal, or how important it is, for the contemporary researchers. So if you would like to get cited within a year, if you want your articles to get citations immediately, you need to look at, the immediacy index. Along with journal impact factor, you can also look at this metric called immediacy index. Another metric is the cited half-life. How long are articles in a particular journal keep on getting cited? So cited half-life tells you the median age of articles that we get cited. So that means how fresh, your articles are. You will notice there are some scientists whose, they reach a citation peak within 3 to 4 years of publication, and then there is a tapering off because the research they have done, that it does not age well. What I mean by that, it doesn't have relevance after a few years. If you are working on more fundamental topics, or you're working on topics, whereby you have addressed a very challenging question, even if you have tried to answer a part of it, that means there will be other people who will have sustained interest in the question and try to understand, work on the other parts of it, and produce research. Your papers will always keep on getting cited. So it depends on the research field and the research question you have chosen, and journals that publish those kind of. So typically journals which work on fundamental subjects, journals which work on very pressing societal problems, often get cited for a longer period of time. One more thing that you can use while in order to increase the chances of your getting published in a particular journal is trying to look at the cited references. Please remember, if you are editors for a particular journal, most of the time, especially for the reputed journals, these editors are extremely well-known and experts in that particular field. So let's give an example. Many of you might have heard of the gene BRCA, right? It's the breast cancer gene. A mutation in that particular gene increases the chance and the risk of breast cancer and it decreases the median age for incidence of breast cancer. So if you are publishing an article on BRCA, most editors will go through a bibliography list and try to identify certain seminal articles, papers that were published by a group working, in Harvard and MIT in the early 2000s, that whether those articles have been, quoted or not. Because these are seminal articles, these are articles. So again, I'm just giving an example from my own field. I come from the field of my research, my graduate PhD research was on anti-cancer drug discovery, on how cancer progressed. And one of the very, very highly regarded articles are there are two reviews called Hallmarks of Cancer by Hanahan and Weinberg. Both of them, I think, have around 15,000 citations each. And if I were to write a statement on saying that inflammation is a hallmark of cancer, and I don't talk about Hanahan and Weinberg, my editor is going to see that as a red flag. That you are not an expert in it. We don't even know who has done seminal, groundbreaking work. So next time you are writing a manuscript, be sure to, be sure that you have cited the right papers, and you have cited papers that other authors writing in the same area are citing. Again, for all of this, a citation database can be very helpful. The citation database will help you get the cited references for a data set very easily. I have already talked about the immediacy index. There is another factor called the eigenfactor. So when we talked about the impact factor, and we talked about how it's a ratio of the number of citations divided by the number of articles, we've been considering every citation to have the same impact, right? I mean, we were not differentiating between the source of the citation. But let's say today I have a paper that has got 10 citations, but 5 of them are from Nature and from a Nobel laureate's lab. I mean, that means my work is being used for some potentially groundbreaking work, because their laboratory is extremely productive. They have been cited, my papers have been cited by other very important papers. So what does eigenfactor do is that it measures the influence of a journal. More higher impact journals cite its articles, more is the eigenfactor. So it is a metric developed by the University of Washington Seattle researchers in conjunction with data taken from the Web of Science. One thing that I will reiterate, please remember, until and unless a journal belongs to Web of Science, it is indexed on Web of Science, and the two indexes, Science Citation Index or Social Science Citation Index, until and it belongs to these two indexes or two lists, a journal cannot have a journal impact factor. Dr. Vamshi talked about fake impact factors in predatory journals. Those are that the journal impact factor is a proprietary trademarked, metric for, from Clarivate Analytics, and it is given only to those journals that are included on these two indexes, SCIE and SSCIE. So if a journal is not over there but still displays an impact factor, that is without doubt a predatory journal. So be very careful. There is a master journalist. So please, if you can just, I will try to put this in the chat. Give me a second. So mjl.clarivate.com. So please go to this journal website, mjlclarivate.com. I'm sorry, everyone. mjlclarivate.com. It's a list of the journals that appear on Web of Science. You just need to create an account over there, and it's freely available. One more thing, a free version of EndNote is actually available. So if you all go to myendnoteweb.com, a free version with certain limited features is actually available. And that version of EndNote also works with Microsoft Word. It can be included. And what EndNote Online gives you is something called a manuscript matcher. It's a very interesting tool whereby you can enter your title and abstract along with the references that you intend to put in your manuscript and run it through our algorithm, and it gives you a list of recommended journals. Basically, this is a text mining algorithm. It looks for journals within the Web of Science, universe, to find out which journals have similar keywords coming frequent, keywords same as your manuscript, and tries to identify those journals for you. So this is also another way to identify the right journal for publication. Now, what I want to talk about was predatory publishers and journals. Very rightly, please remember, most predatory publishers are those that exploit the gold open access route. So there are lots of different types of open access. You can be open access by uploading a legitimate version of your manuscript onto a repository. For example, you can upload your articles to PubMed Central. You can upload to their IISc in India has e-prints. They have their own institutional repository which can be viewed by the public. So those are known as green open access. But there is a route of open access whereby the journal itself is freely available to the end user or the public. And the idea is that the authors need to pay. Now, some of the open access publications can be extremely expensive. Nature Communications recently has said that for some of its publications charges a fee of as high as 9,500 Great Britain pounds, GBP. 9,500 pounds. Just imagine, that's almost, I think, with the current exchange rate, it's around 9.5 lakhs. So 10 lakhs for an article to publish in Nature Communications. But there are a lot of predatory publishers. By the way, Nature Communications is a highly regarded journal, and the reason why they are charging these kind of fees is that they want to be publishing articles from very well-known, well-reputed labs, which are funded by big grants that can afford these kind of publication fees. But there are a lot of small-scale predatory publishers that take advantage of, exploit and pander to scholarly authors. The biggest problem with a predatory publisher is they do a poor or fake peer review. See, the idea of publishing in a journal is that it is very different from publishing a novel. Scientific literature is characterized by the fact that it is being validated by experts. Like, your findings are being looked at, checked by other experts in your field. And if there is this layer of peer review disappears, then your articles are as good as a blog article. There is no scientific validity in it. Now, we have already talked about authentic journal impact factors being provided by Clarivate, but you need to be careful. So because it's a public presentation, we will not be naming or shaming any publishers, but you will notice there are several publishers which have these very bright and zany, website designs, and they have a blinking, flashing light saying journal impact factor 9, journal impact factor 10. And then there is, if you click on it, it comes, there are names like Cosmos Impact Factor, Global Impact Factor, Science Journal Impact Factor. These are short examples of being, they are basically cannibalizing or scavenging on somebody else's trademark property. And many published articles mistakenly believe that their work is in an impact factor journal. So please, before publishing in any journal, do make sure that the journal is listed on Web of Science. Now, there are some practical guidelines towards identifying predatory journals. Dr. Beal, who is the librarian from the Colorado University Health Sciences Center, Boulder, he did publish the Beal's list. But there's a little problem in that. Dr. Beal's list is very conservative in the fact that any solicitation, any journal that solicits for an article, it says that it is predatory. Now, I would say that we slightly disagree with that approach. There are several well-known journals that scout for articles. There's nothing wrong in that. However, that advertising cannot be intrusive. Some of the practical guidelines towards identifying predatory journals, and some of these guidelines are actually used by editors of these citation databases. One is, look at the journal website. Is it difficult to locate or identify? Is it poorly done? If you notice the journal website of journals like any ACS journal, PLOS One, or any Nature Springer journal, it's a very, very detailed journal website, whereby every editorial affiliation, the entire peer review process, how are animal studies to be done, the ethics, every guideline is given in detail. So look at that. Publisher about information is absent. Some of the worst offenders are not transparent about who exactly is the publisher, because they hide behind layers. Another thing is the use of misleading and inaccurate self-calculated impact factors, or the guarantee. Please remember, no journal, and I think Dr. Vamshi covered that, nobody can guarantee you publication. The fact that somebody is guaranteeing your publication goes against the grain of scientific journal, publishing. Publisher direct marketing is obtrusive or intrusive. Instruction to authors is not available. So they are not clear about the reference type. Most well-known journals will have their own reference type, and you will be able to download a file, an EndNote file or a Mendeley reference manager file that gives you that journal, referencing style. These journals, many of the predatory journals do not have any reference type. They do not give you any information on peer review and copyright. Very, very important. This is an open access article. You need to know how much of your copyright you are signing or who owns the final copyright on your article. Information on peer review, again, very important. Please note if that there is a journal body, oversight body called COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics. A genuine journal will always list or give you a link to COP saying that we are following their guidelines. If it's a medical journal, it is ICMJ, International Council of Medical Journal Editors. You have WAME, World Association of Medical Editors. So these kind of guidelines, if they are listed and adhered to, they increase your confidence. Journal scope statement is absent or extremely vague. Please do not publish in a journal that says that they publish articles on science and technology. That means nothing. You will notice that even in multidisciplinary journals, which are genuine journals, they have a very, very clear-cut definition of exactly what they publish and they do not. Another issue is, which a lot of us maybe we miss, if you see more than one repeat author in the same issue. So you'll see a lot of predatory journals, they solicit and publish articles, oftentimes in the same group or the same, institution. If you see that practice, that's a red flag. And please look at the editorial information. The name of the chief editor along with the institution email ID and the affiliation should be very transparently described. So that would be all from my presentation about how. So as I said, there are several metrics. Do not consider one metric in isolation. Look at a combination of metrics to decide where should you be publishing. They could be both quantitative as well as qualitative. And if you are in doubt, please go and ask about it. There are several blogs, websites, discussion forums. One place to see about unfair practices or scientific misconduct is the Retraction Watch blog. Very, very helpful blog. So do look into that also. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them now.
I think there is one question on asking for the URL where they can have the manuscript matcher.
Sorry, I'm muted. Let me just try to find it. Give me 1 second. So the way, this is a small note on the manuscript. Sorry about that. I think I just typed it to one person. So this is a small note about the manuscript matcher. All of you can go to the free version of EndNote through myendnoteweb.com. And on that platform, one of the tabs should have manuscript matcher. So in order to go to the online version of EndNote, the free online version of EndNote, you go to myendnoteweb.com. For all the people who have Web of Science institutional access, you can use the same user ID password combination that you use for Web of Science for your EndNote. There's a question. Can you tell once again about the impact factor formula. Yes. So let us say a journal has published, the first thing, I am trying to calculate impact factor for the year 2020. So for that, I need to, so 2020 is still not over. So, but let's say 2020 is over. This year calendar year is over. I want to calculate the impact factor for this year. I need to find the number of publications that were published in this journal in the 2 previous years. So that is 2018 and 2019. So hypothetically, let's say in 2018 and 2019, totally this journal had 100 papers. Okay. So I will now see for these 100 papers, how many citations were there in the year 2020. So the articles should have been published in 2019 and 2018, but the citations that I'm counting are in the year 2020. So in the year 2020, let's say I have 500 citations for these 100 articles. So what is my impact factor? 500 divided by 100, 5. I hope that is clear now. There is one more question. Can we upload our articles in different domains? How to monitor our citations? So Google Scholar, yes, is a free platform to monitor your citations, and a lot of us do that. The only problem being that if it's a ranking agency or if it is for any kind of official recruitment purposes, typically most institutions do not consider the Google Scholar numbers. Then they look for citation reports from either Web of Science or Scopus or similar, citation databases. But because Google Scholar is not really built to be a citation database engine, and there is a lot of problem in the algorithm. There is duplicate counting. They look at gray literature. So, but it is a good starting point to kind of see where you stand. Why are some predatory journals paid and some are not? Most predatory, 99.5% are paid, sir. Because see, at the end of the day, what is the incentive for the publisher, if it is not a paid, because see, if it's a very low quality journal, and I'm taking the example of Dr. Meghna and Madhuri ma'am, I'm sure as information professionals and librarians, they are not going to be subscribing, paying money to buy a low quality journal, right, for their institutions. So the incentive for a publisher to, do these malpractices is when you have desperate authors who just want a paper out. So they are willing to pay some money and get it out. Right. And this problem has happened because, 10 years ago, UGC came up with the stipulation that there needs to be a certain number of papers before you can graduate or you get promoted. And of course, now they have, put in place several measures. You have the UGC care list, etc., a white list of accepted journals. So the problem here is that most predatory, and I have never come across a predatory journal that is not paid. That would be news to me. But think about the model. If it is not paid, it does not make sense. An institution will do a lot of due diligence before they pay good money and subscribe to a journal. It's only when an author wants an easy publication, they can pay to the publisher, and that's how the model works. And so I hope that answers the question.
Yes, there is one more question, which is EndNote free version? Yes, there is a free version of EndNote, as I said, myendnoteweb.com. That also allows you to use the word processor, in our EndNote plugin. The only challenge here is that the number of citation styles are a little bit limited. You have just 21 citation styles. Whereas if you have the premium free version, which is there for any subscriber who already has institutional Web of Science access, they are eligible for a free premium version. So they have more than 5,000 journal styles. They have around 5 GB of space. They can attach PDFs, etc. But a free version, absolutely free version of EndNote is also available. All you need to do is go to myendnoteweb.com. And you can even use a social media account to create an EndNote account, a Gmail account, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. So a free version is absolutely available.
suppose if one person, many of his articles are published in the same journal, and it's a good journal, what impact does it create on the readers? No, that is not a problem. There are. I am sure if we look at the publication profiles of some of the most well-known ICT professors, you will always see that there is a tendency to publish in certain journals, not because it's easy or they're friends with the editor, because these are journals which are the key opinion leaders or the top authors in their field are referring to. So, for example, if you look at Nobel laureates, they publish so many times in Science and Nature. Okay, but the point here is that these authors, even if they are publishing in this journal, other people are also reading their publications. They are getting cited. These authors are not citing their own articles all the times. Other people, and they have created a name for themselves. People who publish in predatory journals, they will claim via dubious sources to have citations, but you will find that nobody really knows about them. You know, so end of the day, the currency by which scientists survive is reputation, and if you do good research work, you will be able to publish in high quality journals and you will build a reputation for yourself. Will you recommend any other reference management tool apart from EndNote? All of them have their, pros and cons. I represent Clarivate Analytics, so obviously I will say EndNote is the best. But having been a researcher myself, I think EndNote is easy because it's an older tool. Many of us, 10 years ago, when there were other tools were not there in the market, we started using EndNote, and many of us are familiar. So it's an iPhone versus Android question, Having said that, a lot of the other free tools are also good. Try using the free versions of all the tools. See which one suits you best. That would be the unbiased answer from me.
I think that has taken care of each and every question that we have received on the platform. Thank you, Dr. Subhashri, for giving such a detailed explanation of all the various important pointers to identify good journals. You explained very much in detail about the journal impact factor and its association with the subject, which is very, very important for researchers. It's not just about the number, but also the subject in which you are going to publish. So I think this was a very important point. All the other points about the half-life, immediacy index, and the quartiles that you mentioned, I think they will be very, very useful for the researchers. Your detailed explanation on predatory journal publishing and the unsurplus metrics that are really doing rounds in all over the publishing market or the publishing industry. I think researchers need to take care about all these fake matrices and be aware before they really part with their hard research to any other such kind of publishing platforms. So thank you very much for enlightening all the researchers to publish in the right direction. We thank you for accepting our invitation and sparing your time for such an enlightening session. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank
you so much.
I take this opportunity to thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am.
We will, dear participants, we will be having our next session tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will again meet at 2 p.m. and we will be having two sessions tomorrow. One will be a session on research tools and the second will be a practical session on R Markdown. So R Markdown will be practically used to make documents and PPTs. So it will be a practical session. To hope to see you all tomorrow again at 2 p.m. The joining links and the feedback form for today will be sent to you as usual on your registered email ID. Please check your spam and promotions folder to see the mail, or you can save our email ID also so that all the mails that we send you are received by you well in time. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow again at 2 p.m.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, sir.